The automatic doors of Mercy Hill Regional Hospital burst open with such force that the glass rattled in its frames. Rain hammered the pavement outside, but what came through wasn't weather. It was 8 Navy SEALs in full tactical gear, weapons drawn, moving with the precision of men who'd seen real war. Every eye in the lobby snapped to them. Security froze. Administrators backed against walls. And Evelyn Cross, still wearing her nurse's scrubs with her ID badge already stripped from her lanyard, felt her heart stop as the lead operator's eyes locked onto hers across the crowded space. Everyone assumed the same thing. They'd come to arrest her. They were all wrong. The soldier stopped 3 feet away, straightened to attention, and saluted her like she was a commanding officer. Before we dive into what happened next, I want you to stay with me until the very end of this story, because what unfolds will shake everything you think you know about courage. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all started. 6 hours before the doors exploded open, Evelyn Cross had been standing in the supply closet on the 3rd floor of Mercy Hill Regional, counting morphine vials for the second time that shift, because Derek Hartman, the new hospital operations director, had implemented a transparency initiative that required triple verification of every controlled substance. She was 43 years old, had worked night shifts for nearly 2 decades, and had stopped arguing with administrative policies approximately 15 years ago when she realized that hospitals were no longer run by doctors, but by people who measured success in spreadsheets. The closet smelled like disinfectant and cardboard. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, one of them flickering in that particular rhythm that suggested it had maybe a week left before it died completely. Evelyn's back ached, not the sharp pain that meant something was wrong, but the dull, persistent reminder that she'd been on her feet for 9 hours and still had 3 to go. She signed the log, locked the cabinet, and walked back into the hallway just as someone started screaming in the ER. She moved without thinking, the way she always did. Her legs carried her toward the sound before her brain fully registered what she was hearing. A man's voice, raw with panic, shouting about someone not breathing. She rounded the corner into the emergency department and saw chaos. A man in his late 50s, maybe early 60s, was being dragged through the automatic entrance by 2 other men who looked terrified. The patient was unconscious, lips blue, chest still. No medical history bracelet, no identification. Clothes that had seen better days, soaked through with rain and possibly worse. One of the men holding him was crying. "Please, please, he just collapsed. We didn't know what to do." Evelyn hit the wall panel and called the code. Within seconds, Dr. Sarah Chen appeared from one of the exam rooms, already pulling on gloves. They moved together like they'd done this 1,000 times before, because they had. Evelyn got the crash cart while Chen cleared the airway. Monitors came alive with flat lines that should have been peaks and valleys. "No pulse," Chen said, her voice steady. "Starting compressions." Evelyn had the paddles ready before Chen finished the sentence. They worked in the kind of silence that only comes from muscle memory and trust. Push, breathe, shock. Push, breathe, shock. The monitor stayed flat. The man's skin stayed gray. That's when Derek Hartman walked in. He was 31 years old, had an MBA from a school that ranked somewhere in the middle of the 2nd tier, and wore suits that cost more than Evelyn's monthly rent. He'd been at Mercy Hill for exactly 4 months, brought in during the latest round of operational restructuring that everyone knew meant budget cuts disguised as efficiency improvements. "Stop," he said. Chen didn't even look up. "We've got this." "I said stop." His voice was louder now. "Check his insurance status." Evelyn felt something cold settle in her stomach. She kept her hands on the IV line she was prepping. "We're in the middle of a code. And I'm in the middle of explaining hospital policy." Hartman stepped closer, his tablet already in his hands, glowing with whatever dashboard he'd been monitoring. "We've had 3 uninsured admits this week. The board set a limit. The patient doesn't get stabilized until we confirm he can pay." Dr. Chen's hands finally stopped moving. She looked at Hartman like he'd just suggested they perform surgery with a kitchen knife. "That's not how medicine works." "That's exactly how this hospital works now." Hartman's jaw was set. "We're not a charity. We've got shareholders." "We've got a dying man," Evelyn said quietly. Hartman's eyes shifted to her, and she saw something in them that she'd seen before in people who'd never been hit hard enough to learn humility. You've got a security risk and a budget violation. Those two men who brought him in ran the second we called the code. No names, no contact information, no way to bill anyone. That makes this patient a liability. The monitor was still screaming its flatline alarm. Every second they argued was a second closer to brain death, to permanent damage, to a line being crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Evelyn made a choice. She hit the paddles again. The body on the table convulsed. The line stayed flat. Nurse Cross, I'm giving you a direct order to... She hit him again. This time something flickered on the monitor. Not much. Not enough. But something. Chen was already moving again, hands back on the patient's chest, counting compressions like she was counting seconds of her own life. Evelyn pushed the epinephrine, watched the line, waited for the miracle that medicine promised but didn't always deliver. Hartman's voice cut through the room like glass. You're both fired. Effective immediately. Security! The line jumped. Once, twice. Then it started moving in the rhythm that meant a heart had decided to keep fighting. The patient gasped, a horrible wet sound, but he was breathing. His color started to shift from gray to something closer to human. Chen checked his pupils, called for imaging, started rattling off orders to the other nurses who'd appeared during the code. Evelyn stepped back, let them take over, and felt her hands start to shake. Not from fear, from rage. Hartman was already on his phone. I need security to the ER, now. I have 2 staff members who just committed gross insubordination and violated multiple protocols. We saved his life, Chen said, her voice still steady but her eyes burning. You saved a liability. Hartman gestured at the patient, who was now being moved toward imaging. We don't even know who he is. For all you know, he's got warrants. He could be dangerous. He was dying, Evelyn said, and now he's our problem. Hartman turned to face her directly. You're done here, Cross. 20 years, and you throw it away on some nobody who probably won't even survive the night. That's not heroism. That's stupidity. Security arrived. 2 guards Evelyn had known for years, both of them looking uncomfortable. One of them, Marcus, wouldn't meet her eyes. Escort Dr. Chen and Nurse Cross off the premises, Hartman said. Make sure they don't take anything that belongs to the hospital. Chen pulled off her gloves with the kind of controlled fury that suggested she was imagining they were Hartman's face. I'm calling the medical board. You do that, Hartman smiled, and I'll make sure they know you violated patient intake protocols, ignored administrative authority, and endangered hospital accreditation. See how that works out for you. They walked Evelyn to the locker room like she was a criminal. She changed out of her scrubs, the ones she'd bought herself because the hospital stopped providing them 2 years ago, and put on jeans and a sweater that smelled like her apartment, like the life she had outside these walls that suddenly felt very small and very uncertain. Her locker held 20 years of accumulated debris, photos of patients who'd sent thank you cards, a stethoscope her daughter had given her when she graduated nursing school, protein bars she kept forgetting to eat, a spare pair of shoes. She fit what she could into her bag and left the rest. Marcus walked her to the exit. Rain was still coming down, turning the parking lot into a maze of puddles that reflected the security lights. I'm sorry, Evelyn, he said quietly. Don't be. She adjusted her bag on her shoulder. You're just doing your job. So were you. She wanted to say something sharp, something that would make sense of the anger burning in her chest, but she was too tired. She just nodded and walked out into the rain. The parking lot was nearly empty at this hour, just a few cars belonging to the skeleton crew that kept the hospital running between midnight and dawn. Evelyn's Honda was parked in the back, in the spot she'd claimed years ago because it was under a tree that provided shade during summer days when she'd occasionally arrive early and sit in the car, gathering herself before walking through those doors. She was halfway to her car when she heard tires screech. 3 black SUVs came around the corner of the parking structure, moving fast enough that water sprayed from their wheels in wide arcs. They weren't civilian vehicles. She could tell that much from the way they moved, aggressive and purposeful. They pulled up in formation near the emergency entrance, doors already opening before they'd fully stopped. Men poured out. 8 of them. Full tactical gear, rifles, faces hard. Navy SEALs, her brain supplied, though she couldn't have said exactly how she knew. Maybe it was the way they moved, like violence was a language they spoke fluently. Maybe it was the insignia on their uniforms, barely visible in the security lights. Evelyn froze. She was too far away to hear what they were saying to the security guard at the entrance, but she saw the guard step aside immediately, hands up, no argument. The SEALs moved into the hospital like they owned it. For a moment, she considered just getting in her car and leaving. Whatever was happening inside had nothing to do with her. She was fired. She was done. She could go home, pour a glass of wine she couldn't afford, and figure out how to pay rent without a job. But something kept her feet planted on the wet asphalt. Some instinct that had kept her alive through situations that should have killed her back when she'd been a different person in a different life. She waited. Inside the lobby, she could see through the glass doors, shadows moving, people backing away, the SEALs spreading out like they were securing a hostile building. Hartman appeared, his tablet still in his hand, his expression shifting from annoyance to confusion to something that might have been fear. One of the SEALs, the one in front, the one who moved like a leader, was talking to him. Evelyn couldn't hear the words, but she could see Hartman's body language change. He pointed toward the ER. The SEAL shook his head. Hartman pointed again, more insistent. The SEAL stepped closer to him, close enough that Hartman actually flinched, and said something that made every drop of color drain from Hartman's face. Then the SEAL turned and looked directly at Evelyn through the glass doors, through the rain, through the space between them. He walked toward the exit. The doors slid open. Rain hammered the pavement. He stopped 3 feet from her and saluted. "Ma'am," he said, and his voice carried the weight of wars she'd tried to forget. "We need you to come with us." Evelyn's mouth went dry. Behind the SEAL, she could see the entire lobby of Mercy Hill Regional Hospital staring at her. Security guards, night staff. Hartman, still holding his tablet like it was a shield that might protect him from whatever was happening. "I don't understand," she said. "Yes, you do." The SEAL's eyes were steady. "You saved someone tonight. Someone important. Someone who wasn't supposed to be here, who wasn't supposed to be anywhere near this city, but who ended up on your table because shit went sideways and he was running out of places to run. The patient. The unidentified man with no insurance, no history, no name." "Who is he?" Evelyn asked. "He's a federal witness scheduled to testify in 3 days against some very bad people who would very much like him to not testify." The SEAL's jaw tightened. "People who knew he was here. People who have eyes inside this hospital." The rain seemed to get colder. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that man was poisoned 6 hours ago by someone on staff. I'm saying you saved his life by violating protocol and ignoring orders to let him die. I'm saying you did exactly what you were supposed to do, even though you didn't know why." He paused. "And I'm saying we've been looking for you for a very long time, Lieutenant Cross." The name hit her like electricity. No one had called her that in over a decade. No one knew to call her that. She'd buried that part of her life so deep she'd almost convinced herself it had happened to someone else. "I'm not," she started. "Yes, you are." The SEAL stepped aside, gesturing toward the SUVs. "We don't have much time. There are people who know you're here, people who know what you did tonight, and they're coming. We need to move, now." Evelyn looked back at the hospital. Through the glass, she could see Hartman trying to talk to one of the other SEALs, his mouth moving fast, his hands gesturing. The SEAL wasn't even looking at him. "What about Dr. Chen?" Evelyn asked. "She's being escorted to a safe location. She'll be fine. You, on the other hand, are coming with us whether you want to or not." The SEAL's expression softened slightly. "But I'm hoping you'll want to, because the man you saved tonight, he says you did more than keep his heart beating. He says you checked his phone when no one was looking and sent a message to a number you didn't recognize. A message that said 3 words, 'He's still alive.'" Evelyn's breath caught. She had done that. She didn't even know why. The patient's phone had been in his jacket pocket, cracked screen, locked. But when she'd picked it up to move his clothes, it had buzzed with an incoming message that just said, "Confirm status." And something in her, some instinct from years ago, had made her unlock it with the patient's thumb, type those 3 words, and send them before anyone could see. "That message," the SEAL said quietly, "reached a handler who'd been waiting for proof of life for 6 hours. It reached a team that had been mobilizing to extract him, but didn't know where he was. It reached people who needed to know that their witness was still in play. He paused. It reached me. The rain hammered harder. Inside the hospital, more security guards were arriving. Someone was shouting. Hartman was pointing at Evelyn, his face red even from this distance. "Why are you here?" Evelyn asked. "Why you specifically?" The SEAL's expression changed. Something passed behind his eyes. Memory, recognition, pain. Because 12 years ago, in a place we're not supposed to talk about, during an operation that officially never happened, a civilian medic kept 7 of us alive for 18 hours when extraction failed and we were pinned down by hostiles. A medic who carried us out one by one through hostile territory when she should have saved herself. He met her eyes. A medic who we never got to thank because she disappeared the second we hit friendly lines. Evelyn felt her knees go weak. She remembered that operation. Remembered the blood, the screaming, the way time had stopped meaning anything. Remembered dragging men twice her size through sand that turned red under her hands. "I was just a volunteer," she whispered. "You were a saint." The SEAL's voice was rough, and we've been looking for you ever since. Not officially, not through channels, but we don't forget people who save our lives. Behind him, the other SEALs had formed a perimeter. 2 of them were now standing between Evelyn and the hospital entrance, blocking any view from inside, protecting her. "The man I saved tonight," Evelyn said slowly. "The witness? His name is James Carrick, former financial analyst turned whistleblower. He's got evidence that's going to put 12 people in federal prison for the rest of their lives. Politicians, contractors, people with enough money and connections to make anyone disappear." The SEAL's jaw tightened. "Someone on your hospital staff was paid to make sure he didn't survive the night. We're still figuring out who, but you saved him before they could finish the job. And Hartman is currently being detained while we sort out whether he's stupid or complicit." The SEAL glanced back at the hospital. "Either way, he's done." Evelyn looked at the SUVs, then at the hospital, then at the man in front of her who'd just torn open a past she'd spent years trying to seal shut. "I can't just leave," she said. "I have a life here. I have bills. You have a target on your back." The SEAL cut her off, not unkindly. "The people who tried to kill Carrick know you saved him. They know you sent that message. They know who you are now, even if you spent a decade trying not to be her." He stepped closer. "You can come with us and be protected, or you can go home and wait to see if they get to you before we can stop them." The rain was cold on her face. Somewhere in the distance, sirens were starting, police probably, or maybe FBI. The cavalry arriving too late, the way it always did. "What happens if I come with you?" Evelyn asked. "Short term? We debrief you, secure Carrick's testimony, and figure out who compromised this hospital. Long term?" The SEAL's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile. "That depends on whether you're interested in stopping being invisible." "I like being invisible." "No, you don't." He said it with certainty. "You like being safe. There's a difference. And right now, the only way to be safe is to stop hiding." More vehicles were pulling into the parking lot now. Unmarked sedans, federal plates, men in suits carrying badges and authority. The operation was expanding, becoming official, becoming the kind of thing that would make the news by morning. Evelyn made a decision for the second time that night. Not the safe decision, not the smart decision, but the decision that felt like truth. "Okay," she said. The SEAL nodded once, sharp and final. "Let's move." They walked toward the SUVs together. Behind them, Evelyn could hear Hartman shouting something about rights and lawyers and wrongful termination. She didn't look back. One of the other SEALs opened the door to the middle vehicle. Evelyn climbed in. The interior smelled like gun oil and rain and purpose. A laptop was open on the seat, showing surveillance footage of the hospital, multiple angles, time-stamped from hours ago. The SEAL who'd saluted her got in the driver's seat. "We'll brief you on the way. There's a safe house 20 minutes from here. Carrick's already there. He's stable, by the way. Vitals are strong. The medics say if you'd been 5 minutes slower, we'd be having a very different conversation." The SUV pulled out of the parking lot, flanked by the other vehicles. Through the tinted windows, Evelyn watched Mercy Hill Regional Hospital recede into the rain-soaked night. 20 years of her life, vanishing in the rearview mirror. "Hey," the SEAL said, glancing at her in the mirror. "You okay?" Evelyn looked at her hands. They'd stopped shaking. "Ask me in an hour." "Fair enough." He turned his attention back to the road. "For what it's worth, what you did tonight, both saving Carrick and sending that message, you just prevented a major security breach and probably saved the entire investigation. The people trying to stop this testimony have been operating for years. They've got resources, connections, political cover. But they didn't count on someone like you being in the right place at the right time." "I was just doing my job," Evelyn said. "Your job was to follow protocol and let him die." The SEAL's voice was quiet. "You chose to be human instead. That's not nothing." The SUV merged onto the highway. Rain streaked across the windows like tears running backward. Evelyn leaned her head against the glass and closed her eyes, trying to process everything that had happened in the last hour. Fired, escorted out, approached by Navy SEALs, called by a name she'd tried to forget. Lieutenant Cross. She hadn't been Lieutenant Cross in 12 years. She'd been Evelyn, night shift nurse, invisible and unremarkable. Someone who paid her rent on time and didn't cause problems. Safe, small, forgotten. But the world, it seemed, had a long memory. And the past, no matter how deep you buried it, always found a way to dig itself back up. The SUV took an exit she didn't recognize, heading into a part of the city she rarely visited. Industrial buildings, warehouses, the kind of area that looked abandoned but probably wasn't. They pulled into an underground parking garage, descended 3 levels, and parked near an elevator that required a key card to operate. The SEAL turned off the engine. "Welcome back, Lieutenant. We've got a lot to talk about." The elevator descended in silence, broken only by the hum of machinery and the quiet breathing of the 4 SEALs who'd accompanied her inside. Evelyn counted the floors as they dropped: basement 1, basement 2, basement 3, and then kept going. Basement 4, basement 5. She hadn't known buildings in this city went this deep. When the doors finally opened, she stepped into a corridor that looked nothing like the industrial warehouse above. The walls were concrete reinforced with steel, the lighting was clinical and bright, and every 20 feet there was a security camera tracking their movement. This wasn't a safe house. This was a facility. "This way," the lead SEAL said. He still hadn't told her his name, and she got the sense he wasn't going to unless she asked directly. Some habits from that old life were coming back faster than she'd expected. The understanding that in certain contexts, names were privileges, not rights. They walked past closed doors marked with alphanumeric codes instead of room numbers. Behind one of them, Evelyn could hear voices, tense and rapid. Behind another, the quiet beep of medical equipment. Her nurse's instincts kicked in automatically. Heart monitor, steady rhythm, blood pressure cuff cycling. Someone was being kept stable in there. Carrick, she thought, the man she'd saved. The SEAL stopped at a door marked C7 and pressed his palm against a biometric reader. The lock disengaged with a heavy click. Inside was a conference room that managed to feel both temporary and permanent. Folding tables pushed together to form a larger surface, laptops and monitors everywhere. Cables taped to the floor, whiteboards covered in diagrams and timelines that Evelyn didn't have time to parse before a woman stood up from one of the chairs. She was maybe 50, gray hair cut short, wearing jeans and a blazer that didn't quite hide the weapon at her hip. FBI, Evelyn's brain supplied, though again she couldn't have said exactly how she knew. Something about the way the woman carried herself. Authority without the military edge. "Ms. Cross," the woman said, extending her hand. "I'm Special Agent Victoria Brennan. Thank you for coming." Evelyn shook her hand, noting the firm grip and the calluses that suggested Brennan spent time at a shooting range. "I wasn't aware I had a choice." "You always have a choice?" Brennan gestured to a chair. "But I'm glad you made this one. Please sit. We have a lot to discuss and not much time to do it." The SEALs took positions around the room, not quite guarding, but not quite relaxed either. Evelyn sat. Someone put a bottle of water in front of her, still cold, condensation already forming on the plastic. She opened it and drank because her throat was dry and because it gave her something to do with her hands. Brennan pulled up a chair across from her and set a tablet on the table between them. I'm going to be direct because that's all we have time for. The man you saved tonight, James Carrick, is the key witness in a federal investigation that's been running for 3 years. He has evidence, documentation, recordings, financial records that ties a network of defense contractors to a kickback scheme involving nearly $500 million in fraudulent military contracts. Evelyn absorbed that. $500 million. The number was almost too large to mean anything. The people involved, Brennan continued, include 2 sitting senators, a deputy undersecretary of defense, multiple corporate executives, and approximately 30 people in supporting roles ranging from accountants to logistics coordinators. It's the largest corruption case the DOJ has built in 2 decades, and James Carrick is the only person willing to testify who has actual first-hand knowledge of the entire operation. Which makes him a target, Evelyn said quietly. Which makes him the target. Brennan tapped the tablet and turned it so Evelyn could see the screen. It showed a photograph of Carrick, cleaner, healthier, wearing a suit and smiling at some corporate event. 3 weeks ago, Carrick was in protective custody at a secure location in Maryland. Someone leaked his location. We had to move him in the middle of the night. 2 days ago, someone tried to poison him at the new safe house. We moved him again, this time with minimal support staff, trying to keep the circle small. But someone still found him, Evelyn said. Someone always finds them. Brennan's jaw tightened. We thought we had 24 hours before anyone could triangulate his location based on the resources we were pulling. We were wrong. Carrick collapsed in a parking garage 6 blocks from here while being transferred between vehicles. The men with him panicked. They were civilians, administrative support, not trained for emergency medical situations. They made a judgment call to get him to the nearest hospital instead of waiting for our medical team. Mercy Hill, Evelyn said. Mercy Hill. Brennan pulled up another image. Security footage from the hospital parking lot, time-stamped from earlier that evening. It showed 2 men half-carrying, half-dragging an unconscious Carrick toward the emergency entrance. By the time our people realized what had happened, Carrick was already inside. By the time we mobilized a response team, you'd already saved his life. Evelyn looked at the image, remembering the weight of Carrick's body, the blue tint to his lips, the flat line that had screamed in her ears. What was he poisoned with? Tetrodotoxin. Extremely fast-acting, almost impossible to detect without specific tests. It mimics cardiac arrest, respiratory failure. Most people would have pronounced him dead and moved on. Brennan met her eyes. You didn't. I was doing my job. You were violating direct orders from your administrator. Brennan's expression shifted into something that might have been respect. Derek Hartman told you to stop treatment. You ignored him. The mention of Hartman's name brought back the anger Evelyn had been trying to suppress. He was more concerned with insurance status than saving a life. He was concerned with following orders. Brennan tapped the tablet again, bringing up a new document, financial records, wire transfers, account numbers. Derek Hartman received $50,000 3 days ago from an offshore account we've traced back to one of the shell companies involved in the corruption case. He received another $25,000 yesterday. We believe he was paid to ensure that if James Carrick ended up at Mercy Hill Regional, he wouldn't leave alive. The words landed like a physical blow. Evelyn set down her water bottle slowly, carefully, because her hands wanted to shake and she refused to let them. He was going to let a man die for money. He was going to let a man die because someone told him to and made it worth his while. Brennan's voice was hard. We have evidence of at least 3 other people on staff at Mercy Hill who received payments. We don't know yet what their specific roles were supposed to be, but the operation was coordinated. Carrick was supposed to die in that hospital tonight, and it was supposed to look like natural causes or medical incompetence. But I saved him, Evelyn said slowly, understanding beginning to crystallize, and I sent that message from his phone, which told us he was alive and gave us his location. Brennan nodded. You didn't just save James Carrick's life tonight, Ms. Cross. You saved this entire investigation. Without his testimony, we don't have a case. The evidence he's provided is crucial, but without him to authenticate it and explain the context, most of it becomes circumstantial. Defense attorneys would tear it apart. One of the SEALs shifted position near the door. Evelyn glanced at him and saw he was listening to something on an earpiece, his expression unreadable. "How did you find me?" Evelyn asked, turning back to Brennan. "How did you know I was the one who sent the message?" "We didn't at first. The message came from Carrick's phone, which meant someone had physical access to it. We reviewed the hospital security footage and saw you pick it up, saw you do something with it, saw you put it back. We ran your face through our databases." Brennan paused and found something very interesting. The tablet screen changed again. This time it showed a military record, a photograph that was 12 years younger, but unmistakably Evelyn. Lieutenant Evelyn Cross, U.S. Army Reserve Medical Services. Deployed to classified locations, commendations for valor, honorable discharge. But there was more. Brennan scrolled down to a section marked classified, restricted access. Even on the tablet, parts of it were redacted, black bars covering text that Evelyn knew by heart because she'd lived through it. "You were part of a civilian medical volunteer program attached to special operations units," Brennan said quietly. "You went into places that officially didn't have American personnel. You treated soldiers who officially weren't there. You saved lives that officially didn't need saving." "I was just a medic," Evelyn said, but the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. "You were embedded with SEAL Team 7 during Operation Sandstorm." Brennan's voice dropped lower. "When their extraction failed and they were pinned down for 18 hours behind enemy lines, you kept them alive. You performed field surgery without proper equipment. You carried wounded men through hostile territory. You refused evacuation until every single one of them was out." Evelyn closed her eyes. She could still smell the blood, still feel the sand under her knees, still hear the gunfire that had seemed to come from every direction at once. "The team leader," Brennan continued, "filed a recommendation that you receive the Silver Star. It was denied because the operation was classified and officially never happened. But the men you saved that day didn't forget. They kept track of you. And when your name appeared in our system tonight, one of them made a phone call." The lead SEAL spoke for the first time since they'd entered the room. "I made the phone call." Evelyn opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked at him. He was older now, heavier in the shoulders, face marked by years and weather, but she recognized him. Jackson. Sergeant Jackson, who'd taken shrapnel to the leg and kept fighting anyway, who she'd carried 300 yards to cover while he bled through the tourniquet she'd improvised from her own shirt. "You remembered me," she said. "I never forgot you." His voice was rough. "None of us did. We tried to find you after the deployment ended, but you disappeared. No forwarding address, no contact information, nothing. It was like you decided to stop being Lieutenant Cross and started being someone else." "I did," Evelyn said simply. "That person got people killed. That person saved 7 lives." Jackson stepped closer to the table. "Including mine. I wouldn't have my kids if you hadn't dragged me out of that hellhole. Martinez wouldn't have gotten married. Thompson wouldn't have made it to his father's funeral. You gave us futures, Lieutenant. And then you vanished before we could say thank you." The room was very quiet. Somewhere above them, in the world that existed outside this buried facility, rain was still falling and hospitals were still running, and Derek Hartman was probably still trying to explain himself to federal agents who didn't care about his excuses. "I didn't want to be thanked," Evelyn said. "I wanted to forget." "Why?" Brennan asked, not unkindly. Evelyn looked at her hands. Nurse's hands now, clean and capable, nails trimmed short for practical reasons. But she could still see them covered in blood, could still feel them shaking as she'd tried to tie off an artery with dental floss because it was the only thing she had. "Because I was a volunteer," she said quietly. "I wasn't supposed to be in combat zones. I was supposed to provide basic medical support at forward operating bases, treat minor injuries, assist the actual combat medics. But they kept sending me further forward because they needed people who could think under pressure. And I kept going because I thought I could help. Until the day I couldn't." She stopped, but Brennan waited and Jackson waited, and the silence demanded that she finish. "There was another operation," Evelyn continued. 2 months after Sandstorm. Different team, different mission. They took fire during extraction. The pilot was hit. I tried to treat him while we were still in the air, but Her voice cracked. "I couldn't stop the bleeding. He died before we landed. 23 years old. Had a daughter he'd never met." "That wasn't your fault," Jackson said. "It was my responsibility. Evelyn met his eyes. I was the medic. His life was in my hands. And I failed. You did everything you could. It wasn't enough. She said it flatly, a truth she'd carried for 12 years. After that, I requested discharge. I came home, got my nursing license, and decided I was done with war. Done with situations where the stakes were life or death and the margins were too thin. I wanted to work in a hospital where there were protocols and backup and equipment that actually worked, where if I failed, there was someone else who could step in. Brennan was watching her with an expression that suggested she understood more than Evelyn was saying. But you never really left, did you? You still put yourself in situations where you're the only thing standing between someone and death. That's different. That's just nursing. You broke protocol tonight to save a man you didn't know, Brennan said. You risked your career, your safety, everything. That's not just nursing, Ms. Cross. That's who you are. Evelyn wanted to argue, but she was too tired and Brennan was probably right. The seal at the door spoke into his radio, voice too low for Evelyn to catch the words. Then he looked at Jackson and nodded once. Jackson's expression hardened. We've got movement. Brennan was on her feet instantly, all traces of sympathy gone, replaced by pure operational focus. Where? Mercy Hill. Someone just tried to access the server room. Hospital security stopped them, but whoever it was had credentials that should have worked. IT director level access. They're looking for records, Brennan said, trying to figure out who treated Carrick, who saw him, who might know something. They already know, Evelyn said quietly. Hartman saw me save him. He saw me with the phone. If he's working with them. He's in custody, but that doesn't mean he hasn't already made calls. Brennan grabbed her tablet, fingers flying across the screen. I need a full sweep of Cross's apartment, work history, financial records. If they're tying up loose ends, she's on the list. The cold Evelyn had felt in the parking lot was back, settling into her bones. My daughter. Brennan looked up sharply. You have a daughter? She's 24, lives in Seattle, works in tech. We talk every week. Evelyn's mind was racing. If they're looking into me, if they find her, give me her information, now. Brennan had a phone out, already dialing. Full name, address, place of employment. Evelyn rattled off the details, her voice steadier than she felt. Maya Cross, apartment on Pine Street, works for a startup downtown. Has a roommate named Jennifer, drives a blue Civic, likes Thai food and indie rock, and video calls her mother every Sunday morning. Brennan relayed the information to whoever was on the other end of the phone, then listened for a moment. Good. Keep the surveillance tight. If anyone approaches her building, I want to know immediately. She hung up and looked at Evelyn. We're putting a protection detail on your daughter. She won't know they're there unless something happens. What do I tell her? Evelyn asked. She's going to call me tomorrow. She always calls on Sundays. Tell her you're helping with a federal investigation and everything's fine. Don't give specifics. Don't scare her. Brennan's expression softened slightly. We're good at this, Ms. Cross. Your daughter will be safe. Jackson moved to the door and opened it. 2 more people entered. A man in tactical gear carrying a case, and a woman in scrubs who had the efficient look of a military medic. They nodded to Brennan and set the case on the table. Lieutenant Cross, the woman said, and Evelyn flinched at the title. I'm Chief Petty Officer Sarah Kim. I need to brief you on Carrick's current condition and run through some scenarios. I'm not military anymore, Evelyn said. Tonight you are. Kim opened the case, revealing medical supplies and a laptop. Carrick is stable but not out of danger. The tetrodotoxin is clearing his system, but he's got organ stress and we're monitoring for secondary complications. We've got him on a ventilator as a precaution. He's conscious but can't talk yet. Can I see him? Evelyn asked. That's why we brought you down here. Kim pulled up a video feed on the laptop. It showed a hospital room, not like the ones at Mercy Hill, more like an ICU suite, all clean lines and serious equipment. Carrick was in the bed, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that Evelyn could read as easily as text. His vitals were good. Oxygen saturation was holding. Heart rate was elevated but steady. He's been asking for you, Kim said. Evelyn blinked. What? He woke up about 40 minutes ago. First thing he did was write on a notepad asking who saved him. We told him a nurse at Mercy Hill. He wrote your name. Kim turned the laptop so Evelyn could see another image, a piece of paper with shaky handwriting that said Evelyn Cross. "We didn't tell him your name, Lieutenant. He knew it." "How?" Evelyn leaned closer to the screen, studying Carrick's face. She'd seen it for maybe 5 minutes total, most of that time spent looking at monitors instead of the man. She didn't know him, couldn't know him. Brennan pulled up another file on her tablet. James Carrick worked for Halston Defense Systems for 6 years. They're one of the primary contractors involved in the kickback scheme. He was a senior financial analyst, had access to all the budget documentation, saw everything. When he realized what was happening, he spent 18 months collecting evidence before he came to us. "I still don't understand what that has to do with me," Evelyn said. "Halston Defense Systems has a subsidiary called Silverton Medical Solutions. They provide medical equipment and supplies to military hospitals and field units. 3 years ago, they landed a contract to supply the medical volunteer program you were part of." Brennan met her eyes. James Carrick processed that contract. He saw the manifest of where the supplies were going. He saw the names of the medical personnel. Understanding hit Evelyn like cold water. "He knew who I was before tonight. He knew you were part of the volunteer program. He knew you'd served in classified operations. And when he woke up in that ER and saw you working on him, he recognized you." Brennan's expression was grim. "Which means when he sent that text message himself later, because he did, after you unlocked the phone, he sent a second message with more details. He specifically mentioned that Lieutenant Cross had saved him." "Who did he send it to?" Evelyn asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "To his handler, to us, to the people protecting him." Brennan paused. "And potentially to anyone else who might have been monitoring his phone. We don't know yet if it was intercepted." The room felt smaller suddenly. Evelyn stood up, needing to move, needing to think. "So the people trying to kill him know I'm involved. They know I saved him. They know I sent the first message." "We have to assume they know everything Carrick knows," Jackson said, "which means they know you're ex-military, they know you have specialized training, and they know you're now a liability to their operation." "I'm a night shift nurse," Evelyn said, but it sounded weak even to her own ears. "You're a decorated combat medic who just prevented a federal witness from being assassinated." Brennan's voice was hard. "You're a threat, and these people deal with threats permanently." The door opened again. This time it was a young man in a suit, FBI credentials on his belt, carrying a folder that he handed directly to Brennan. She opened it, read quickly, and her jaw tightened. "What?" Jackson asked. "Derek Hartman just made bail, posted by a lawyer we've linked to the Halston Defense Network. He's out." Evelyn felt her stomach drop. "When?" 20 minutes ago. Brennan looked at Jackson. "I want surveillance on him immediately. If he makes contact with anyone connected to this case, I want to know." "Already on it," Jackson said, speaking into his radio. Evelyn's mind was racing through implications. Hartman was out. He knew she'd saved Carrick. He'd seen her face, knew her name, had access to her employment records. He knew where she lived because HR had her address. He probably knew about Maya because emergency contact information was in her file. "I need to see Carrick," Evelyn said suddenly. "Now." Brennan studied her. "Why?" "Because if he knew who I was, if he recognized me, then he might know something else. Something about who's after him. Something that could help." Evelyn met her eyes. "And because he asked for me. That means something." After a moment, Brennan nodded. "Kim will take you, but you've got 10 minutes. We need to move you to a secure location before Hartman or anyone else figures out where you are." They walked down another corridor, this one lined with rooms that had actual windows. Thick glass, probably bulletproof, looking into medical suites that could have belonged to any high-end private hospital. Kim used a key card to open the door to the third room on the left. Inside, James Carrick looked smaller than he had on the gurney, more fragile, but his eyes were open and alert. The ventilator tube had been removed, replaced by a nasal cannula. He saw Evelyn and tried to sit up. "Don't," she said automatically, moving to his bedside. "You need to rest. You saved my life." His voice was rough, barely above a whisper, but clear. "Twice. I'm a nurse. It's what I do. You're Lieutenant Evelyn Cross." He reached for the notepad on the table beside his bed, but his hand was shaking too badly. I saw your name on the supply manifest. Read your service record when I was pulling documents. Thought about reaching out to you when this all started, but I didn't want to pull you into it. I'm in it now, Evelyn said quietly. I'm sorry. And he meant it. She could see it in his eyes. Genuine regret. They're going to come after you. Everyone who's helped me ends up dead or disappeared. My lawyer, my accountant, a journalist I talked to. They're systematic. They don't leave loose ends. How many people are involved? Evelyn asked. Too many. Carrick's breathing was labored. It's not just the contractors. It's senators, Pentagon officials, judges. They've got a network that goes deep, and they've got someone inside the FBI. Evelyn felt the air leave her lungs. What? How do you think they keep finding me? Carrick's laugh was bitter. Every safe house, every relocation, someone leaks it within hours. Someone with access to federal databases, federal resources, someone who knows exactly where to look. Kim stepped forward. Mr. Carrick, you can't make accusations like that without evidence. I have evidence. Carrick looked at Evelyn. But it's not digital. It's not in any file the FBI has. It's physical documentation I hid before I came forward. Bank statements, photographs, recordings, proof of who's involved and how deep it goes. Where? Evelyn asked. Carrick's expression changed, became something harder. That's the problem. I hid it somewhere I thought was safe. Somewhere they'd never think to look. But if they know about you, if they've connected you to me, they might figure it out. Figure what out? Evelyn felt ice forming in her chest. I hid it in Mercy Hill Regional Hospital, Carrick said. In the morgue. The words hung in the air like smoke. Kim swore under her breath. Evelyn just stared at him. Why there? She finally asked. Because 6 months ago, I was doing research on hospital security protocols for one of Halston's bids. Mercy Hill was on the list. I toured the facility, saw the layout, realized the morgue had minimal surveillance and electronic access logs that could be easily manipulated if you knew how. Carrick's voice was getting weaker. I planted the documents in a sealed body bag marked as biohazard material. It was scheduled for cremation, but I paid the morgue attendant to delay it. Should have had weeks before anyone noticed. But that was 6 months ago, Evelyn said. And that attendant is dead now. Car accident 3 months back. Which means I don't know if the bag is still there or if it's been destroyed. Carrick closed his eyes. But if it's still there, it's everything. Every name, every transaction, every piece of proof we need to burn this whole network down. Kim was already on her radio, relaying the information. Evelyn heard her say morgue and Mercy Hill and immediate extraction before the words became too technical to follow. They're going to go get it, Evelyn said to Carrick. They'll send a team. They can't. Carrick opened his eyes. The morgue has a biometric lock now. New security upgrade last month. Requires palm print from authorized personnel. If anyone else tries to access it, the system locks down and alerts hospital security. So they'll get authorization from the hospital, Evelyn said. They can't do that without raising red flags. If the FBI shows up asking for morgue access, whoever's inside their organization will know exactly what they're looking for. Carrick met her eyes. But you worked there for 20 years. Your palm print is in the system. You could walk in, retrieve the bag, and walk out, and no one would question it. I was fired tonight, Evelyn said. My access was revoked. Administrative access was revoked, but biometric data doesn't delete automatically. There's a 72-hour delay for security reasons. They don't want people locked out of critical areas during transition periods. Carrick's breathing was getting harder. You have maybe 48 hours before your prints are purged from the system. After that, the evidence is gone. Kim had finished her radio conversation. She looked at Evelyn with an expression that suggested she already knew what was coming next. This isn't your job, Kim said. We'll find another way. What other way? Evelyn asked. You just said if the FBI requests access, there's a mole who'll tip off the network. If you send in a tactical team, you'll draw attention. If you wait, the evidence might be destroyed. She looked at Carrick. How well hidden is it? Sealed bag, bottom drawer, marked as John Doe biohazard cremation hold. Unless someone's specifically looking for it, they'll never find it. But if they start searching, If someone tips them off that there might be evidence hidden in that hospital, they'll tear the place apart. Carrick's voice dropped to a whisper. You're the only person who can walk in there without raising alarms. The only person they won't see coming. They fired me, Evelyn said again. They'll recognize me. Not if you go in through the service entrance. Not if you go at shift change when everyone's distracted. Not if you move fast and get out before anyone realizes you were there. Carrick reached out, his hand finding hers. I know I have no right to ask this. I know you've already done more than anyone could expect. But if that evidence is destroyed, everyone I've gotten killed died for nothing. And the people responsible walk free. Evelyn looked at his hand on hers, pale and weak, kept alive by machines and medicine and her own refusal to follow orders. She thought about Hartman, out on bail, probably making phone calls right now to people who would pay him to finish what he'd started. She thought about Maya in Seattle, going about her life with no idea that someone might be watching her apartment because her mother had made a choice to save a stranger. She thought about the pilot who died in her arms 12 years ago, the one she hadn't been able to save, and all the other people she had saved since then by being invisible and unremarkable and safe. And she thought about Jackson and his team, pinned down behind enemy lines, bleeding out in the sand while she'd made the choice to stay instead of save herself. When? She asked quietly. Kim started to object, but Brennan's voice came through the speaker system in the room, cold and clear. Stand down, Chief. This is Cross's call. Evelyn looked up at the camera in the corner, understanding that Brennan had been watching this whole conversation. You don't have to do this, Brennan's voice continued. We can find another approach. How long will that take? Evelyn asked the camera. Too long, Brennan admitted. And Carrick's right. We can't move on this officially without risking the mole finding out. If you go in alone. We can provide surveillance support, but we can't send backup without compromising the operation. So if something goes wrong, you're on your own. Brennan's voice was hard. I need you to understand that, Ms. Cross. This isn't a sanctioned operation. If you're caught, if you're hurt, the FBI can't officially acknowledge any involvement. You'd be a fired nurse illegally accessing hospital property. But if I succeed, there was a pause. Then Brennan said, if you succeed, you'll have saved more than one life. You'll have saved an entire investigation and put very bad people in prison for the rest of their lives. Evelyn looked at Carrick, at his pale face and his desperate eyes, and made a choice for the third time that night. Tell me exactly where in the morgue, she said, and then tell me how I'm getting in without being seen. Carrick gave her the details in short, labored sentences punctuated by the beep of monitors and the hiss of oxygen flowing through the cannula. Bottom drawer, east wall, sealed bag marked with a red biohazard tag, and handwritten label reading JD-CREMHOL D-0847. The morgue operated on skeleton staff during weekend nights. One attendant, usually doing paperwork in the office at the north end, nowhere near the actual storage units. Access through the service corridor connected to the loading dock, 2 flights of stairs down, biometric reader on the door that should still recognize her palm print for another 48 hours. Kim handed Evelyn a small earpiece. Comms only. We can hear you, you can hear us, but this is one-way support. We're not coming in unless you call for extraction, and even then it'll take us minimum 3 minutes to reach you. 3 minutes is a long time, Evelyn said. 3 minutes is forever when someone's shooting at you, Jackson added from the doorway. He'd appeared sometime during the conversation, silent as a ghost. Which is why you're not going in without a weapon. Evelyn looked at him. I don't carry weapons. You did once. He pulled a compact handgun from his belt, checked it with the easy familiarity of someone who'd handled firearms more often than most people handled their phones, and set it on the table beside Carrick's bed. Glock 19, 15 rounds. Safety's here. Trigger pull is smooth. You remember how to use it. She did. Muscle memory didn't forget, even when the conscious mind tried to. I'm not going to shoot anyone. Hope you're right. Jackson's expression was hard. But hope isn't a plan. Take the gun. Evelyn picked it up, felt the weight of it, cold and solid and terrible. She checked the magazine like he'd taught her a lifetime ago, verified the safety, and tucked it into the waistband of her jeans under her sweater. It pressed against her spine, uncomfortable and wrong. "There's a vehicle waiting in the garage," Brennan's voice said through the speaker. "Civilian car, clean plates, nothing that traces back to us. You'll drive yourself to Mercy Hill, park in the public lot, not staff parking. Walk in like you're visiting someone. Service corridor access code is 4792. That hasn't changed since you left. Once you're in the morgue, you have approximately 6 minutes before the next security sweep. Get the bag, get out, drive straight back here." "What if someone sees me?" Evelyn asked. "Then you're a former employee who forgot something in her locker and got lost looking for it. Confused, apologetic, harmless. They'll escort you out, and that'll be the end of it." Brennan paused. "Unless whoever sees you is working for the people who want Carrick dead. Then it gets complicated." "Complicated how?" "Then you run," Jackson said flatly. "And you don't stop running until you're back in that vehicle and calling for extraction." Evelyn looked at Carrick one more time. He'd closed his eyes, but she could see his lips moving silently, maybe praying or maybe just counting breaths. She'd kept him alive twice now. The idea of all that effort being wasted because some evidence got destroyed felt obscene. "I'll get it," she said. 20 minutes later, she was behind the wheel of a gray Honda Civic that smelled like air freshener and anxiety, driving through rain that had settled into a steady drizzle. The streets were mostly empty at this hour, just past 3 in the morning, that dead zone when even the bars had closed and the early risers hadn't started yet. Traffic lights cycled through their patterns for an audience of no one. The earpiece crackled. 2 blocks out, Kim's voice said. "Parking lot on your right. Cameras are on a loop. We've got control of the security feed, so you won't show up on hospital surveillance. But that only works for exterior cameras. Once you're inside, you're visible." Evelyn pulled into the lot, found a space near the edge where the overhead lights didn't quite reach, and killed the engine. Through the windshield, she could see Mercy Hill Regional Hospital, all 6 floors of it, windows glowing with the fluorescent promise of people being kept alive by machines and medicine and the dedication of staff who probably hadn't slept in 20 hours. She'd walked through those doors thousands of times, knew every hallway, every stairwell, every shortcut between departments. 20 years of her life lived in those corridors, reduced now to a single objective: get to the morgue, retrieve a bag, get out. Simple. Except nothing was ever simple when lives depended on it. She got out of the car. The rain touched her face like cold fingers, and she pulled up the hood of her jacket, not the nurse's scrubs she'd left in her locker, but civilian clothes that made her look like anyone else who might be visiting at odd hours. Jeans, dark jacket, running shoes in case running became necessary. The gun pressed against her spine with every step. The main entrance was too visible, too many cameras and staff even at this hour. She walked around the side of the building to the loading dock where supply trucks made deliveries during normal business hours. The bay doors were closed, but beside them was a regular door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." She tried the handle, locked. The earpiece crackled. "Access code 4792, keypad to your left." She found it, punched in the numbers. The lock disengaged with a click that sounded too loud in the quiet. She pulled the door open and stepped into a corridor that smelled like industrial cleaning solution and the particular staleness of air that didn't circulate enough. The service corridor was exactly as she remembered. Concrete floor, pipes running along the ceiling, doors leading to storage rooms and mechanical spaces. She moved quickly but not frantically, trying to project the confidence of someone who belonged here. Footsteps echoed. She reached the stairwell, pushed through, started descending. 2 flights down. The basement level where the morgue lived, along with the hospital's central utilities and storage for equipment too large or too rarely used to keep on the upper floors. The air got colder as she went deeper, and she could hear the low hum of HVAC systems working to keep the building at temperature. At the bottom of the stairs, another door. This one had a biometric reader beside it, a small pad that glowed blue in the dim light. "Palm print," Kim's voice reminded her, as if Evelyn could forget. She pressed her hand against the reader, felt it scan the lines and whorls that supposedly made her unique. For a long moment nothing happened, and she had the terrible thought that maybe her access had been purged already. Maybe Hartman had called someone and had it expedited. Maybe this whole plan was dead before it started. Then the reader beeped softly, and the light turned green. The lock disengaged. Evelyn pushed through into the morgue. It was colder here. Refrigerated air kept at a temperature meant to slow decay. The room was larger than most people would expect, divided into sections. The examination area with its steel tables and overhead lights, the wall of refrigerated drawers where bodies waited for autopsy or identification or family to claim them, and the office where the attendant should be doing paperwork. She could see light coming from under the office door at the far end. Someone was here. "Contact," she whispered into the earpiece. "Expected," Brennan's voice came back. "Weekend night attendant is Gregory Mills, 62 years old, been working morgue shifts for 15 years. Not on our list of compromised staff. Avoid him if you can, but he's not a threat." Evelyn moved along the wall, keeping to the shadows cast by equipment that probably had names she'd never learned because the morgue wasn't her department. She reached the wall of drawers, numbered and labeled, some with tags indicating occupied status. "The east wall," Carrick had said. "Bottom drawer." She found it. Drawer 847, bottom row. A red biohazard tag attached to the handle with a handwritten label that matched what Carrick had described. Her hands were steadier than she'd expected as she gripped the handle and pulled. The drawer slid out with a whisper of well-oiled metal. Inside was a body bag, black and sealed, the kind used for contaminated remains. The biohazard symbol was printed on the side, along with handling warnings in 3 languages. She lifted it carefully, lighter than a body, but not empty. Something inside shifted with a sound like paper sliding against plastic. "Got it," she whispered. "Good. Now get out. You've been inside for 3 minutes." Evelyn pushed the drawer closed, cradled the bag against her chest, and turned back toward the door. That's when the office light went out. She froze. Darkness settled over the morgue, broken only by the dim glow of emergency lighting and the blue LEDs on the refrigeration units. She could hear movement, footsteps, deliberate and unhurried, coming from where the office had been. "Lieutenant?" Jackson's voice in her ear, sharp and urgent. "We just lost interior camera feeds. Someone cut the connection from inside the building." The footsteps stopped. In the darkness, a voice spoke. "Evelyn Cross." Not a question, a statement. Someone who knew she was here, who'd been waiting. She didn't recognize the voice. Male, middle-aged, calm in the way that dangerous people often were. She shifted her grip on the bag, the other hand moving instinctively toward the gun at her spine. "You can't see me," the voice continued, "but I can see you. Thermal imaging. Quite useful in a room kept this cold. Your body heat stands out beautifully against all that refrigerated air." "Who are you?" Evelyn asked, abandoning any pretense of stealth. "Someone who's been paid quite a lot of money to ensure that James Carrick's testimony never happens, and someone who's now being paid even more to ensure that anyone who's helped him shares his fate." The voice moved, circling. "You've made things very complicated, Ms. Cross. Very expensive. People are unhappy." "Abort," Brennan's voice commanded in her ear. "Get out now. We're sending—" The earpiece went dead. Evelyn touched it, felt nothing but silence. Jammed, probably. She was alone. "Your friends can't help you," the voice said, confirming her suspicion. "This room is shielded now. No signals in or out. It's just us, Ms. Cross. You and me and that bag you're holding." "I'm just a nurse," Evelyn said, buying time, eyes adjusting slowly to the darkness. She could make out shapes now, the examination tables, the drawers, the edges of equipment. But no person. Whoever this was, they were good at staying hidden. "You're Lieutenant Evelyn Cross, decorated combat medic, recipient of classified commendations, the woman who saved SEAL Team 7 during Operation Sandstorm." The voice was closer now, definitely circling. "You're a lot of things, but just a nurse isn't one of them. That was a long time ago. And yet here you are, breaking into a morgue in the middle of the night to retrieve evidence for a federal investigation. Old habits resurface when the stakes are high enough, don't they?" Evelyn's fingers closed around the gun. She didn't draw it yet. The moment she did, this conversation became a gunfight, and she didn't know where her target was. But the weight of it was reassuring, a promise that she wasn't completely defenseless. "The bag," the voice said. "Put it down and walk away. You get to live. Simple transaction. And if I don't? Then this becomes messy, and I'm very good at cleaning up messes. I've cleaned up 3 already this week. People who helped Carrick, people who knew too much, people who made the mistake of thinking they could fight back. A pause. You know what I've learned? Everyone thinks they're willing to die for something, right up until the moment dying becomes real. Then they reconsider. You're going to kill me either way, Evelyn said, because it was obvious. If she put down the bag and left, she'd be a witness, a loose end. People like this didn't leave loose ends. Probably, the voice admitted, but if you cooperate, it'll be quick, painless, professional. If you fight, it'll be neither of those things. I'm offering you a choice in how this ends, Ms. Cross. That's more courtesy than most people get. Evelyn's mind raced through options. The door was behind her, maybe 15 feet. She could run for it, but she'd be exposed, and if this person had thermal imaging, they'd track her easily. She could try to fight, but fighting someone she couldn't see in the dark while holding a bag full of evidence was tactically stupid. She could put down the bag and draw the gun, try to force a confrontation on her terms. Or she could do what she'd done in that desert 12 years ago when extraction had failed and the enemy had them surrounded. She could adapt. The morgue's examination area had overhead surgical lights. If she could reach them, turn them on, she'd eliminate her opponent's advantage. But the switches were across the room, past where she estimated the voice was coming from. I need to think, she said, stalling. You have 10 seconds. She counted in her head. On 5, she moved. Not toward the door, not toward the voice, toward the wall of refrigerated drawers, low and fast, using the examination tables as cover. Behind her, she heard the distinctive sound of a suppressed weapon firing. 2 shots, precise and controlled, hitting where she'd been standing. Professional, like he'd said. She reached the drawers, yanked one open, pulled it all the way out. The empty drawer came free from its track, and she shoved it hard across the floor toward where the shots had come from. It clattered and scraped, metal on concrete, drawing attention. More shots. 3 this time, tracking the sound. Evelyn ran parallel to the wall, still low, the bag clutched against her chest. She could see the examination area now, the switches on the wall beside the main table. 20 feet, 15. Clever, the voice said, and now it sounded annoyed. But ultimately futile. She dove the last 10 feet, hit the floor hard, rolled, and came up with her hand slapping the light panel. The overhead surgical lights blazed to life with the intensity of a dozen suns. The morgue became day-bright, every shadow banished, every corner exposed. And Evelyn saw him. He was standing near the office door, dressed in dark tactical clothing, a suppressed pistol in one hand and what looked like a thermal monocular in the other. Late 40s, average height, the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after seeing it, exactly what a professional killer should look like, unremarkable and lethal. Their eyes met across the room. He raised the pistol. Evelyn dropped the bag and drew her own weapon in one motion, muscle memory taking over, 12 years of dust blown off in an instant. She didn't aim for center mass like the range instructors taught. She aimed for the hand holding the gun and fired twice. The reports echoed like thunder in the enclosed space. The man jerked backward, his pistol clattering to the floor. His hand was bleeding, but he was already moving, diving behind one of the examination tables. Federal investigation, Evelyn shouted, because it seemed important to establish that, even though her hands were shaking and her heart was trying to punch through her ribs. Drop your weapon, and he came up from behind the table with a knife, thrown with professional precision. Evelyn twisted sideways. The blade missed her throat by inches and embedded itself in the wall behind her with a solid thunk. She fired again, but he was already moving, using the tables and equipment as cover, closing the distance between them. She backpedaled, trying to keep obstacles between them, trying to maintain distance because up close he'd have the advantage. Trained fighters always did against people who'd learned to shoot, but not to brawl. Her foot caught on something, maybe the bag she'd dropped, and she stumbled. He was on her instantly, one hand grabbing her wrist, twisting the gun away from him. She remembered this from defensive training that felt like it had happened to someone else. Don't fight the grip, use the momentum. She let him twist her arm, used the rotation to drive her elbow into his jaw. His head snapped back. His grip loosened. She tore free, brought the gun up, but he was faster, slamming into her and driving them both backward into the wall of drawers. Metal clanged. Pain exploded across her shoulders. The gun fell from her hand and skittered across the floor. They grappled in silence, broken only by breathing and the scuff of shoes on concrete. He got a hand around her throat, started to squeeze. She drove her knee up, aiming for the groin but hitting thigh instead. He grunted, shifted his weight, and suddenly she was on the ground with him on top of her and his hands closing around her windpipe. Pressure built in her head. The lights started to blur. She clawed at his hands, but his grip was iron and professional and committed to the job of killing her. Her right hand scrabbled across the floor, searching for the gun, for anything. Her fingers closed around something cold and cylindrical, one of the drawer handles that had come loose when she'd pulled out that drawer earlier. She swung it up with all the strength she had left, caught him across the temple. He rocked sideways. She sucked in air, swung again. This time he blocked it, but the distraction was enough for her to buck her hips and throw him off balance. They rolled across the floor, a tangle of limbs and violence. She ended up on top somehow, drove her fist into his face once, twice, 3 times. His nose broke with a sound like green wood snapping. Blood sprayed. He threw her off with a strength that suggested desperation or training or both. She hit the floor hard, tasted copper, realized she'd bitten her tongue. He was getting to his feet, blood streaming from his nose, and she saw him reach for something at his belt. Another gun. Backup weapon. Evelyn's hand found her own gun on the floor beside her. She grabbed it, rolled onto her back, and fired as he brought his weapon up. 4 shots. Center mass. The way she'd been taught when accuracy under stress was more important than finesse. He staggered backward, hit the wall of drawers, and slowly slid down to the floor. His gun fell from his hand. His eyes found hers, and in them she saw something like surprise. "Should have taken the deal," he managed to say, blood bubbling on his lips. Then he stopped moving. Evelyn lay on the floor, lungs heaving, entire body shaking with adrenaline crash. The surgical lights blazed overhead, merciless and bright. The man who'd tried to kill her sat against the wall of drawers, eyes open and seeing nothing. She'd killed him. The thought was distant, abstract, like it had happened to someone else. She'd killed people before, in that desert operation when the hostiles had come too close and choices had narrowed to survival or death. But that had been war, or something close enough to it. This was a hospital morgue in the middle of a city where she'd worked for 20 years, where she'd saved lives, not taken them. The earpiece crackled back to life. "Evelyn, respond. Do you copy? We've got shots fired reported at your location, multiple units responding." "I'm here," she said, her voice sounding wrong, too calm. "I'm alive." "The shooter?" She looked at the body. "Not alive." Silence on the line. Then Brennan's voice, carefully controlled. "Did you get the evidence?" Evelyn turned her head. The bag was lying 5 feet away, the one she'd dropped when the shooting started. She crawled to it, checked the seal. Still intact. "I have it," she said. "Then get out, now. Hospital security is en route to the morgue. You've got maybe 90 seconds. 90 seconds. She climbed to her feet, legs unsteady, grabbed the bag. The gun was still in her other hand, and she looked at it with something like betrayal. Jackson had been right. Hope wasn't a plan. Neither was going unarmed into a situation where people wanted you dead. She moved toward the door, stepping around the body without looking at it too closely. Her hands left bloody prints on the door handle. The biometric reader didn't care. It recognized her palm and let her out. The stairwell was empty. She climbed fast, trying not to think about the blood on her clothes or the man she'd left behind or the way her hands wouldn't stop shaking. 1 flight, 2 flights. She emerged into the service corridor and nearly ran into Gregory Mills, the morgue attendant, who was hurrying toward the stairs with a confused expression. "I heard," he started. Evelyn pushed past him. "Call security. Someone broke into the morgue." "Wait, aren't you?" She didn't wait. She ran down the corridor toward the loading dock exit, the bag clutched against her chest, the gun tucked back into her waistband. Behind her, she heard Mills shouting something, but the words didn't matter anymore. The loading dock door was ahead. She hit it at full speed, burst out into the rain and the darkness and the parking lot where her car waited. Sirens were getting closer, police probably, responding to reports of gunfire at the hospital. She threw the bag into the passenger seat, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot just as the first patrol car turned onto the street. She drove carefully, obeying speed limits, signaling every turn, being the most law-abiding driver in the city. The earpiece was silent. Either they were letting her focus on driving, or they'd lost the connection again. She didn't care which. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to grip the steering wheel with white-knuckled force to keep the car steady. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind exhaustion and something darker. The knowledge that she'd crossed a line she'd spent 12 years staying behind. She'd killed someone. In a hospital. In the place where she'd dedicated her life to saving people. The rain hammered the windshield. Streetlights blurred past. The city looked the same as it always did, indifferent to what had just happened, to the violence that had erupted in its belly. She made it 3 blocks before she had to pull over. She barely got the door open before she vomited onto the wet pavement, her body rejecting everything. The violence, the fear, the terrible clarity of what she'd done. When her stomach was empty and her throat was raw, she sat back in the driver's seat and just breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way she'd been taught in combat stress training. Slow and steady. Reclaim control. The earpiece crackled. "Evelyn?" "Still here," she managed. "Are you injured?" Brennan's voice, professional and concerned. "No." "The subject you engaged, can you confirm status?" "He's dead." The words tasted like ashes. "I shot him 4 times. Center mass. He's not getting up." "Understood. We'll handle cleanup. Continue to the rendezvous point." Evelyn wanted to ask how you cleaned up a body in a hospital morgue without raising questions, but she was too tired and too shattered to care about the logistics. She put the car back in gear and drove. The rain was starting to let up by the time she pulled into the underground garage where this had all started. The same elevator, the same descent into the buried facility. But she felt different now, changed in a way that went deeper than exhaustion. Jackson was waiting when the elevator doors opened. He took one look at her, at the blood on her clothes, at her shaking hands, at whatever was written on her face, and his expression hardened. "Jesus," he said quietly. "I got the evidence," she said, holding out the bag. "I can see that." He took it from her gently, like she might break if handled too roughly. "I can also see you had to fight for it." He was waiting, knew I was coming. She followed him down the corridor, her legs moving on autopilot. Had thermal imaging, jammed communications, professional. "We know. We ID'd him from the morgue cameras before they went dark." Marcus Chen, former military contractor, worked for a private security firm with ties to Halston Defense. He's been suspected in at least 6 assassinations, but we've never been able to prove it. "Well, now you can prove one less," Evelyn said flatly. Jackson stopped walking. He turned to face her, and his eyes were serious. "Listen to me very carefully. What happened in that morgue? That was survival. You defended yourself against a trained killer who was there to murder you and destroy evidence. You didn't have a choice." "I shot him 4 times. Because 1 or 2 might not have stopped him. You did what you had to do." Jackson's voice was firm. "You think I haven't been there? You think every operator hasn't had that moment where they realize they just killed someone and have to decide whether that makes them a monster? It doesn't. It makes you someone who survived, and that's not nothing." Evelyn wanted to believe him. She wasn't sure she did. They reached the conference room. Brennan was there, along with Kim and several other people Evelyn didn't recognize. Analysts, probably, or other federal agents. The bag was already open on the table, its contents spread out under bright lights. Documents, USB drives, photographs, all sealed in protective plastic to preserve them. Brennan looked up as Evelyn entered. "This is everything?" "That's what Carrick said." Evelyn's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Bottom drawer, east wall, sealed bag." "It's substantial." Brennan picked up one of the documents, scanned it quickly. "Bank transfers, meeting minutes, email printouts. This is..." She stopped, looked at one of the analysts. "Get forensic accounting on this immediately. I want verification within the hour." The analyst nodded and started gathering documents. Other people were photographing everything, creating digital backups, and handling the evidence with the care usually reserved for archaeological artifacts. Kim appeared at Evelyn's side with a first aid kit. "You're bleeding." Evelyn looked down. Her knuckles were split, her hands scraped raw. She hadn't noticed. Kim guided her to a chair and started cleaning the wounds with antiseptic that stung and brought tears to her eyes. "The man in the morgue," Evelyn said to Brennan. "How did he know I was coming?" We're investigating that now. Brennan's jaw was tight. Our working theory is that someone tipped off the network when Carrick mentioned the morgue. They had time to position Chen before you arrived. Someone on your team, Evelyn said. Someone with access to our communications, yes. Brennan met her eyes. Which is why we're moving to a completely isolated protocol. No more shared channels, no more team briefings. Information is compartmentalized from here on out. What about Hartman? In custody again. We picked him up 20 minutes ago, making a phone call from a burner phone to a number that traces back to one of the shell companies. He's done. Kim finished bandaging Evelyn's hands and moved to her face, dabbing at a cut near her hairline that Evelyn didn't remember getting. The touch was gentle, professional, and it took everything Evelyn had not to flinch away from it. I need to see Carrick, Evelyn said suddenly. Brennan looked at her. Why? Because I did what he asked. I got the evidence. Her voice cracked. I killed someone to get it. He should know what it cost. For a long moment, Brennan said nothing. Then she nodded. 5 minutes. Then you're going into protective custody until this is over. They walked to Carrick's room in silence. The man was awake, propped up slightly in bed, looking better than he had hours ago. His eyes went to the blood on Evelyn's clothes and widened. You got it, he said. I got it. Evelyn stepped closer to the bed. Your evidence. Everything you hid. It's real. It's enough. Thank you. Carrick's voice was rough with emotion. Thank you for... Don't thank me. The words came out harder than she'd intended. I just killed a man in the place where I spent 20 years saving lives. That morgue was sacred to me. Every body that came through there deserved dignity, deserved respect, and I turned it into a battlefield. You turned it into a place where justice survived, Carrick said quietly. That man who tried to kill you, Marcus Chen, he's the one who murdered my lawyer, shot her in her car outside her office, made it look like a carjacking. She had 3 kids. His eyes were wet. So don't apologize for doing what I didn't have the courage to do. Don't apologize for being stronger than me. Evelyn looked at him, at this man who'd risked everything to expose corruption, who'd watched people die because they'd tried to help him, who'd been hunted and poisoned and nearly killed. And she saw herself reflected in his eyes, someone who'd made impossible choices and would have to live with them. The evidence, she said. Will it be enough to convict them? It's enough to bury them all. Carrick's voice was certain. Every name, every transaction, every lie. It's all there. And now, because of you, it'll see daylight. Kim touched Evelyn's shoulder. Time to go. Evelyn nodded, started to turn away. Lieutenant, Carrick called out. She stopped. For what it's worth, he said, I'm sorry you had to be a soldier again. I know you didn't want that life anymore. Neither did you, Evelyn said. But here we both are. She left before he could respond. The facility had a dormitory section, small rooms with basic furniture, everything locked and secure. Kim showed her to one, provided clean clothes that fit reasonably well, pointed out the bathroom down the hall. Evelyn took the longest shower of her life, watching blood and rain and 20 years of carefully constructed normalcy spiral down the drain. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel with her hair dripping, she found Jackson sitting in the hallway outside her room. Couldn't sleep, he said by way of explanation. Figured you might not be able to either. Evelyn sat down beside him, back against the wall. The concrete was cold through the towel. I keep seeing his face, she said quietly. Chen. The way he looked when he realized I'd actually shot him, like it surprised him. Probably did. Most people hesitate. That's what gets them killed. Jackson was quiet for a moment. You didn't hesitate. I didn't have time to. That's the truth of it. When it's you or them, thinking gets you dead. You did what your training taught you to do, what I taught you to do back in that desert. I didn't want to be that person anymore. I know. Jackson's voice was gentle. But that person is who kept you alive tonight, and who kept Carrick's testimony alive, and who's going to put very bad people in prison where they belong. Evelyn leaned her head back against the wall. What happens now? Now you rest. Tomorrow, technically today since it's almost dawn, the evidence gets authenticated. Carrick gives his testimony. Arrests get made. People go to trial. Justice happens, or the closest thing to it that exists in the real world. And me? You disappear for a while. Protective custody until the trials are over. Then you get your life back. What life? Evelyn laughed, but it wasn't a sound that contained any humor. I'm fired. I'm unemployed. I killed a man in a hospital morgue. I don't get to go back to being invisible. No, Jackson agreed. You don't. But you get to be something else, something better. What's better than invisible? He looked at her with eyes that had seen too much death and somehow still managed to believe in something. Recognized, valued, needed. Before Evelyn could respond, Brennan appeared at the end of the hallway, walking fast, her expression grim. We have a problem, she said. Evelyn was on her feet immediately, exhaustion forgotten. What kind of problem? The kind where the evidence you risked your life to retrieve just became a lot more complicated. Brennan held up her tablet, showing a news alert. Someone just leaked to the press that James Carrick is alive and in federal custody. Every news outlet in the country is running the story, which means everyone who wants him dead knows exactly where to look, Jackson finished. Brennan nodded. And they're coming. The facility went into lockdown within seconds. Evelyn heard the heavy clang of security doors sealing, the hum of additional systems coming online, the controlled urgency of people who'd trained for exactly this scenario. Jackson was already on his radio, coordinating with his team. Brennan was issuing rapid-fire orders to analysts who scattered like disturbed ants. How did it leak? Evelyn asked, following Brennan back toward the command center. We're tracing it now, but preliminary analysis suggests someone with access to sealed federal court documents. Brennan pulled up multiple screens on the command center's main display, news websites, social media feeds, all carrying the same story with slight variations. Star witness in defense corruption case alive after assassination attempt. James Carrick survives poisoning, prepared to testify. Federal investigation into $500 million fraud scheme intensifies. They didn't just leak that he's alive, one of the analysts said, pointing at a screen. They leaked the general location. Sources say Carrick is being held at a secure federal facility in the industrial district. That narrows it down to maybe 6 possible buildings in a 2-mile radius. Which means they'll hit all 6 simultaneously, Jackson said, appearing in the doorway. Overwhelming force, maximum confusion. Standard playbook for this kind of operation. Brennan's jaw tightened. How long until we can relocate Carrick? Not fast enough. We'd need to prep a secure transport, coordinate with multiple agencies, arrange a decoy convoy. Minimum 2 hours, probably 3. And the moment we start moving, we expose him. Jackson crossed his arms. We're better off fortifying here and waiting for reinforcements. Reinforcements from where? Evelyn asked. If there's a mole with access to federal systems, how do you know who to trust? The question landed in the room like a grenade. Brennan and Jackson exchanged looks that contained entire conversations Evelyn wasn't privy to. We don't, Brennan finally admitted, which is why we're operating on the assumption that anyone outside this facility could be compromised. The only people we trust completely are the ones currently inside these walls. Evelyn counted quickly. Maybe 20 people total, agents, analysts, the SEAL team, medical staff, against an unknown number of attackers with professional training and probably superior firepower. That's not enough, she said. It's what we have. Jackson's expression was grim. But we've got defensive advantages. This facility was designed to withstand assault. Reinforced walls, limited entry points, surveillance coverage of every approach. They can come at us, but they'll bleed for every inch. And if they're willing to bleed, Evelyn asked, then we make sure they bleed more than we do. Kim appeared, slightly out of breath, carrying a tablet. Carrick's awake and asking what's happening. His vitals are spiking. Elevated heart rate, blood pressure climbing. He knows something's wrong. Tell him the truth, Brennan said. He's earned that much, but keep him calm. The last thing we need is him coding because his heart can't handle the stress. Evelyn found herself moving toward Carrick's room before she'd consciously decided to. Kim fell into step beside her, and they walked in silence through corridors that suddenly felt more like a bunker than a medical facility. Carrick was sitting up in bed, the monitors around him painting a picture of a man on the edge of panic. His eyes locked onto Evelyn the moment she entered. They know where I am, he said. It wasn't a question. Someone leaked it to the press. Evelyn pulled a chair close to his bed, sat down. The facility is secure, we're protected. No one's ever been protected from them. Carrick's laugh was bitter. You don't understand what you're up against. These people, they don't just have money and connections. They have systems. They have leverage on everyone from local cops to federal judges. If they want someone dead, that person dies. It's just a matter of time. You're still alive because you keep saving me. But how many times can one person get lucky? He looked at his hands, at the IV lines and the pulse oximeter clipped to his finger. Everyone who's helped me has died. My lawyer, my accountant, the journalist, even the morgue attendant who agreed to hide my evidence, died in a car accident that wasn't an accident. And now you're on that list, you and everyone in this building. Evelyn felt the weight of his words, the accumulated guilt of a man who'd watched his choices destroy lives around him. She recognized it because she'd carried something similar for 12 years. The pilot who died in my arms, she said quietly, the one I told you about. His name was Danny Reeves, 23 years old from Oklahoma, loved country music, and wanted to be a commercial airline pilot after his service ended. I couldn't save him. Tried everything I knew, but it wasn't enough. Carrick looked at her, confused by the shift. For years, Evelyn continued, I told myself that his death was my failure, that if I'd been better, faster, smarter, he'd still be alive. It ate at me, made me quit field medicine, made me hide in a hospital doing routine work where the stakes felt lower. She met his eyes. But hiding didn't change the truth. Danny Reeves died because someone shot him, not because I failed to save him. The responsibility belongs to the person who pulled the trigger. You're saying this isn't my fault. I'm saying the people who murdered your lawyer, your accountant, that journalist, they made those choices, not you. You gave them evidence to expose corruption. They chose murder. Evelyn leaned forward. And if they come here tonight, if they try to finish what they started, that's their choice too. But we get to choose how we respond. By fighting, by surviving, by making sure your testimony happens, by ensuring that every person they've killed, every life they've destroyed, counts for something. Evelyn's voice was steady. You asked me earlier why I sent that message from your phone. I didn't think about it. I just did it. Instinct from a life I thought I'd left behind. And maybe that's the answer. Maybe we don't get to leave certain things behind. Maybe they're part of who we are. Carrick was quiet for a long moment, then reached out and gripped her hand. If we die here, we're not dying here. But if we do, I want you to know what you did, coming to that morgue, killing that man to protect the evidence. That took more courage than anything I've done. I hid documents and ran. You stood and fought. I had training, Evelyn said. You had a choice, and you chose to fight. That's not training, that's character. Kim's voice cut through the moment. We need to move him to the secure room, Brennan's orders. They transferred Carrick carefully, monitors and all, to a reinforced room deeper in the facility. No windows, blast-resistant door, emergency medical supplies stocked on the walls. It looked exactly like what it was, a last-stand position. Back in the command center, Jackson had a map of the facility displayed on the main screen with defensive positions marked in blue and potential breach points in red. His team was gearing up, body armor, rifles, the methodical preparation of people who knew violence intimately and respected it enough to take it seriously. Best estimate, Jackson said to Brennan, we've got maybe 30 minutes before the first probe. They'll test our perimeter, see how we respond, then commit to a full assault if they think they can win. How many are we expecting? Professional hit team? Probably 8 to 12 operators. Well-armed, well-trained, coordinated. They'll try to overwhelm us fast, get to Carrick before we can call in backup. We can't call in backup, Brennan reminded him, not without knowing who's compromised. Then we hold the line ourselves. Jackson looked at Evelyn. You know how to shoot. You proved that tonight. I need you on the south corridor, watching the service entrance. It's a secondary breach point. They might try it if the main assault bogs down. Evelyn wanted to argue, to say she was a nurse, not a soldier, but the words died before she could speak them. She'd killed Marcus Chen in that morgue. She'd crossed the line from healer to fighter. There was no going back now. Give me a rifle, she said. Jackson handed her an M4 carbine, the weight familiar in her hands despite the years. 30 rounds, semi-auto only. You've got 2 spare magazines. Don't waste ammunition on suppressive fire. Pick your targets, make your shots count. I remember the training. Good, because tonight we find out if training beats desperation. He turned to address the entire room. Listen up. We don't know how many are coming or exactly when, but we know why. They want Carrick dead and the evidence destroyed. We don't let either of those things happen. Hold your positions, maintain communications, and remember, we're not trying to win a war. We're just trying to survive long enough for the cavalry to arrive. What cavalry? Someone asked. The kind that shows up when people realize a federal witness is under attack and half the defense contracting industry is about to implode. Jackson's smile was hard. The DOJ doesn't like losing witnesses. Once they confirm what's happening here, they'll send everything. But until then, we're on our own. Evelyn took her position in the south corridor, a long hallway with concrete walls and overhead lighting that cast harsh shadows. The service entrance was at the far end, a heavy door with a biometric lock. If anyone tried to breach it, she'd have clear sight lines. She checked the rifle again, muscle memory guiding her through the process. Magazine seated, chamber clear, safety on. The weapon was ready. Whether she was ready was a different question. The earpiece crackled. All positions, this is command. We have movement on external cameras, multiple vehicles approaching from different vectors. Stand by. Evelyn's heart rate increased, but her hand stayed steady. She'd learned a long time ago that fear was useful if you could channel it, deadly if you let it control you. South Corridor acknowledge, Jackson's voice said. South Corridor clear, Evelyn replied. Standing by. Minutes passed like hours. She could hear her own breathing, the hum of ventilation systems, the distant murmur of voices from the command center. Then, cutting through it all, the sharp crack of gunfire. Contact north perimeter, someone shouted over the radio. Multiple shooters, suppressed weapons. They're trying to breach the main entrance. More gunfire. Sustained this time. The sound echoed through the facility, distorted by concrete and distance into something almost abstract. They're using explosives, Jackson's voice was tight. Shape charges on the door. Fall back to secondary positions. Evelyn kept her eyes on the service entrance, fighting the urge to abandon her post and help with the main assault. That's what they'd want, everyone rushing to one breach point while they opened another. Her instincts proved correct 30 seconds later when the service entrance door shuttered. Not an explosion, something more methodical. Someone was trying to override the biometric lock. South Corridor, I have activity at my position, Evelyn said into her radio. Someone's accessing the lock. Hold your fire until you have positive identification, Brennan's voice responded. Could be our people relocating. Evelyn watched the door. The lock was cycling through attempts, red light flashing with each failure. Whoever was out there was good, probably using some kind of electronic bypass. The question was whether the facility's security would hold long enough. It didn't. The lock flashed green. The door began to open. Evelyn raised the rifle, sighted down the barrel at the widening gap. Her finger rested beside the trigger guard, not on the trigger itself. She'd wait until she could identify friend or foe. A hand appeared, pushing the door wider. Then a figure stepped through, dressed in black tactical gear, face covered by a balaclava. Not FBI. Not SEAL team. Enemy. The figure raised a weapon. Evelyn fired first. 3 rounds, center mass, exactly as she'd done in the morgue. The figure dropped, but there were more behind him. 2 more came through the door fast, spreading out, professional and coordinated. Evelyn ducked behind a support column as return fire sparked off the concrete where she'd been standing. South breach confirmed, she shouted into the radio. Multiple hostiles engaging now. She leaned out, fired twice at the nearer target, saw him stumble but not fall. Body armor. She adjusted her aim higher, went for the headshot. He went down hard. The third attacker was already moving, using cover, trying to flank her. Evelyn couldn't hold this position alone. She backed up toward an intersection in the corridor, keeping her rifle trained on the area where the attacker had disappeared. Movement to her left. She spun, nearly fired, recognized Kim at the last second. Friendly? Kim shouted, dropping beside her with her own weapon. Jackson sent me. How many? 3 so far, 2 down, one mobile and trying to flank. North entrance is holding, but barely. They're throwing everything at it. Kim checked around the corner, pulled back as shots rang out. We need to seal this corridor, or we'll be fighting on two fronts. Evelyn had an idea. The fire suppression system. If we trigger it manually, flood the corridor. Won't stop them, but it'll slow them down. Kim was already moving toward the control panel mounted on the wall. She smashed the glass cover, pulled the manual release. Alarm shrieked. Water began pouring from overhead sprinklers, turning the corridor into a deluge. Visibility dropped to almost nothing through the sheets of falling water. Fall back! Evelyn grabbed Kim's arm. They retreated toward the intersection, maintaining cover, weapons trained on the flooded corridor. A figure emerged from the water, and Evelyn fired without hesitation. The figure dropped. But was it the third attacker, or a fourth? How many had come through that door? Command, South Corridor is compromised, Kim reported. Recommend sealing the section and falling back to the secure room. Negative, Brennan's voice came back. North entrance just failed. They're inside the facility. We're evacuating to the secure room now. Hold your position for another 60 seconds, then fall back. We need time to get everyone inside. 60 seconds. Evelyn counted them in her head while watching the flooded corridor for movement. 30, 45. She was at 58 when multiple figures burst through the water, firing as they advanced. Move! Kim pulled her backward, and they ran. Behind them, the corridor erupted with gunfire. Bullets sparked off walls, shattered overhead lights. Evelyn and Kim reached another doorway, ducked through, and Kim slammed it shut and engaged the manual lock. This won't hold them long, Kim said, breathing hard. Doesn't have to. Just has to hold them long enough. They sprinted through connecting corridors, following the route to the secure room. Behind them, they could hear doors being forced open, the systematic advance of people who knew how to clear a building. The secure room was ahead, heavy doors still open, Jackson visible inside waving them forward. They covered the last 20 yards at a dead run and dove through the entrance. Jackson slammed the door shut, engaged multiple locks, and spun the wheel that sealed it completely. Inside, the room was crowded. Brennan, her team of analysts, the medical staff, Carrick still on his hospital bed with monitors beeping steadily. Everyone was armed. Everyone looked terrified except the SEALs, who just looked focused. Status, Brennan demanded. Facility is compromised, Jackson reported. Multiple breach points, estimate 10 to 12 hostiles inside. They're clearing rooms systematically. This door will hold? For a while. It's rated for explosive breaches up to a certain yield. If they've got military-grade charges, we've got maybe 30 minutes. If they're using commercial explosives, we've got longer. And then? Jackson's expression was grim. And then we find out if we're better at close-quarters combat than they are. Evelyn checked her rifle, half a magazine left, plus her 2 spares. Maybe 90 rounds total. She looked around the room, counted weapons and ammunition, did the math. They could hold for a while, make the attackers pay for every inch. But eventually, numbers would win. Unless something changed. The evidence, Evelyn said suddenly. They're here for Carrick and the evidence. What if we give them one? Brennan looked at her sharply. Explain. The documents from the morgue, we've photographed everything, created digital backups, right? We don't actually need the physical evidence anymore. So what if we let them have it? They'd destroy it, Brennan said. Exactly. And in the process, they'd be captured on every camera in this facility, destroying federal evidence. We'd have them on video committing a federal crime. Evelyn's mind was racing. More than that. We tell them where it is, draw them away from this room, give them a target that isn't us. Jackson was nodding slowly. We put the evidence in a different location, let them know through intercepted communications where to find it. They pull back to destroy it, and we use the gap to either escape or fortify further. But they'd have to believe the communications are genuine, Shurtiga, Brennan said. They'd have to think they're intercepting real intel, not a trap. So we make it messy. We argue about it over open channels. Someone says we should move the evidence. Someone else says it's too risky. Make it sound like we're panicking, making mistakes. Evelyn looked at Carrick. He could even demand it. The witness, terrified, insisting we secure the evidence somewhere else because he doesn't trust this room. Carrick caught on immediately. I can do that. I can sound terrified. Hell, I basically am terrified. It's risky, Brennan said, but her expression suggested she was considering it. If they don't take the bait, we've accomplished nothing. If they do take it and then realize it's a trap, they'll come back angrier. But in the meantime, Jackson said, I can relocate my team. Hit them from behind while they're focused on the evidence. Turn this from a siege into an ambush. The radio crackled. A new voice, cold and professional, came through on an open channel. Federal agents inside the facility. We know you have James Carrick, and we know you have evidence from Mercy Hill Regional Hospital. Surrender both, and you'll be allowed to leave unharmed. Brennan grabbed a radio. This is Special Agent Victoria Brennan, FBI. You're assaulting a federal facility. Stand down immediately or face the full consequences of... The full consequences of what? The voice interrupted. You're outgunned, surrounded, and cut off. We have the facility locked down. No one's coming to help you. Surrender Carrick and the evidence, or we breach that door and take them by force. Jackson muted the radio. They're buying time. Probably setting charges on the door right now. Then let's give them something else to do. Brennan unmuted the radio, but before she could speak, Carrick started shouting, I don't care about the standoff. I care about the evidence. If this door fails, if they get in here, they'll destroy everything. Move it somewhere else, now. Perfect. Evelyn watched Brennan's face, saw the agent understand what Carrick was doing. Mr. Carrick, calm down, Brennan said into the radio, her voice carrying just the right note of stress. The evidence is secure. Nothing's secure if they're literally outside the door. Carrick's voice cracked convincingly. There's a storage room on sublevel 6, isn't there? The one with the independent ventilation system? Move the evidence there. At least if they breach this room, they won't get everything. We're not splitting our resources, Brennan argued, playing her part. That evidence is the only thing keeping me alive. If it's destroyed, my testimony means nothing. Move it. The radio was silent. Evelyn imagined the attackers listening, weighing their options. The secure room was hard to breach. But a storage room on sublevel 6? That would be easier. And if they could destroy the physical evidence, even if digital copies existed, they'd muddy the legal waters significantly. Finally, the cold voice came back. You have 5 minutes to make your decision. Then we breach the door. Jackson was already moving, gathering his team. We move now, quietly. South stairwell to sublevel 6. Set up an ambush around the storage room. When they come for the evidence, we take them. I'm going with you, Evelyn said. Negative. You stay here. Protect. You need every gun you can get, and I've already killed twice tonight. What's a few more? The words tasted bitter, but they were true. Jackson studied her for a moment, then nodded. Stay close. Follow my lead. Don't do anything heroic. 4 SEALs, Kim and Evelyn, left through a secondary exit in the secure room. A narrow passage designed for emergency evacuation. They moved through the facility like ghosts, using corridors the attackers hadn't reached yet, descending through stairwells that echoed with distant gunfire. Sublevel 6 was deep, almost at the foundation of the building. The storage room Jackson had referenced actually existed, a climate-controlled space used for sensitive documents. He positioned his team around it, creating overlapping fields of fire, turning the corridor into a kill box. Then they waited. Evelyn's hands were steady on her rifle, but her mind was racing. She'd gone from nurse to soldier to killer in the space of one night. Tomorrow, if there was a tomorrow, she'd have to figure out what that made her. But tonight, she was just someone trying to survive and protect a man who'd risked everything for truth. Footsteps, quiet but audible. At least 4 people, moving carefully. Jackson's hand signal. Hold fire. Let them commit. The attackers appeared at the end of the corridor, 4 figures in tactical gear, weapons ready. They approached the storage room cautiously, checking corners, maintaining tactical spacing. Professional. They reached the door. One of them pulled out what looked like a thermite charge, designed to burn hot enough to destroy paper evidence in seconds. Jackson's hand dropped. The corridor erupted. SEALs fired from 3 directions simultaneously, catching the attackers in perfect crossfire. 2 went down immediately. The third managed to return fire, bullets sparking off walls, before Kim put him down with a headshot. The 4th tried to run and made it maybe 5 steps before Jackson's rifle found him. Silence fell, broken only by the ringing in Evelyn's ears. She'd fired her weapon, though she couldn't remember making the conscious decision. One of the bodies had her rounds in it. "Clear," Jackson said, checking each body. 4 down. That's 14 total accounted for, maybe 16 in the initial assault. We've thinned them out significantly. "Or just killed the advance team," Kim said grimly. "They could have reinforcements." The radio crackled. Brennan's voice urgent. "Jackson, they're pulling back from the secure room. Whatever you did down there, it worked. They're regrouping. Heading back to you now. Keep that door locked until you hear my voice." They made their way back up, moving even more carefully than before. The facility felt different now. Violated. Dangerous in a way it hadn't been before. Bodies lay in corridors they passed, some in tactical gear, some in FBI windbreakers. The siege had cost both sides. When they reached the secure room, Jackson gave the signal and Brennan opened the door. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted from terror to cautious hope. "What's the status?" Brennan asked. 4 more down in the ambush. The evidence trap worked." Jackson stripped off his tactical vest, his shirt underneath dark with sweat. "But we can't assume that's all of them. We hold here until—" The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in after a moment, bathing everything in red. But in that moment of darkness, everyone understood what had happened. "They cut the power," Brennan said. "They're coming." The emergency lighting turned the secure room into something from a nightmare. All red shadows and harsh angles. Evelyn could hear the steady beep of Carrick's monitors, the sound of people checking weapons, the collective intake of breath that meant everyone understood what was coming. "They'll use the darkness," Jackson said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Night vision, thermal optics, they'll have every advantage. Then we take it away from them." Brennan was already moving, pulling equipment from a locker mounted on the wall. She distributed what looked like small cylinders to each of the SEALs. Thermite flares burn hot enough to overwhelm thermal imaging, bright enough to ruin night vision. "We turn this room into a sun and make them as blind as we are." One of the analysts spoke up, voice shaking. "The cameras! We still have battery backup on the security system. I can route feeds to tablets, give us eyes on the corridors outside." "Do it," Brennan ordered. Within seconds, multiple tablets were displaying grainy footage from hallway cameras, all bathed in the same red emergency lighting. Evelyn watched the screens, saw movement at the edges of the frame. Figures advancing, tactical and coordinated, weapons ready. "They're coming from 3 directions," the analyst said. "North corridor, east stairwell, and—" He paused, zoomed in on one feed. "That's the ventilation shaft. Someone's inside it." Jackson swore. "They're not just breaching the door, they're coming through the ceiling." Everyone looked up. The ceiling was reinforced concrete, but the ventilation grate was metal. If someone had the right tools and enough time, they could cut through. "How long?" Brennan asked. "Minutes. Maybe less." Jackson positioned his team, creating overlapping fields of fire that covered the door, the ceiling, every possible entry point. "When they come, they'll come fast. Flashbangs, smoke, overwhelming force. Keep your heads down, pick your targets, and for the love of everything, don't shoot each other in the chaos." Evelyn found herself standing near Carrick's bed, the rifle feeling heavier with each passing second. She'd killed 4 people tonight, maybe 5. She'd lost count in the firefight at sub-level 6. Each one had been necessary, justified by the immediate threat to her life and others. But necessity didn't make it easier. It didn't stop the small voice in her head that whispered she'd become exactly what she'd left the military to avoid. Carrick reached out, touched her hand. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "you gave me a chance. That's more than I had this morning." "We're not done yet." "No, but if we don't make it, we will." She said it with a conviction she didn't entirely feel. Because those people out there, they're used to winning, used to everyone being too scared or too compromised to fight back. But we're not scared anymore, and we're definitely not compromised. The ventilation grate above them shuddered. Someone was cutting through from above, the screech of metal on metal barely audible over the hum of backup generators. "Contact! Ceiling!" one of the SEALs shouted. Jackson tossed a thermite flare directly at the grate. It ignited with a brilliant white light that seared away the red emergency glow, turning everything into sharp contrast and deep shadows. The heat was immediate and intense, and Evelyn heard screaming from inside the ventilation shaft. Whoever had been cutting through had just gotten a face full of burning magnesium. The door exploded. Not the whole door. A shaped charge had blown the locking mechanism, sending metal fragments spinning through the room. Smoke billowed in, thick and chemical. Evelyn dropped to one knee using Carrick's bed as cover, her rifle trained on the doorway. Figures emerged from the smoke, moving fast. The SEALs engaged immediately, controlled bursts of fire that lit up the room in strobing flashes. Evelyn fired at a shape that resolved into a person, saw them fall, fired again at another target. A flashbang detonated, the world turning white and silent. Evelyn's training kicked in. She'd closed her eyes at the flash, protected her hearing by opening her mouth. The disorientation lasted maybe 3 seconds, long enough for attackers to advance, but not long enough to overwhelm defensive positions. She opened her eyes to chaos. Hand-to-hand fighting near the door, SEALs grappling with attackers who'd gotten too close for rifles to be effective. One of the analysts was down, bleeding from a head wound. Kim was firing methodically, dropping targets with the precision of someone who'd been trained to stay calm under pressure. Another attacker came through the smoke, and Evelyn's rifle was empty. She dropped it, grabbed the handgun still tucked in her waistband, fired twice. The attacker stumbled, kept coming. She fired 3 more times, center mass, and finally they went down. The gunfire was deafening in the confined space, the smoke so thick she could barely see 3 feet in front of her. Someone tackled her from the side. She went down hard, the handgun skittering away. Hands closed around her throat, the same terrible pressure she'd felt in the morgue with Marcus Chen. She drove her knee up, connected with something soft. The pressure lessened. She bucked, threw her attacker off, scrambled for the gun. Her fingers closed around it just as the attacker lunged again. She fired point blank. The body fell on top of her, heavy and still. She pushed it off, gasping for air, and saw Jackson standing over her, offering his hand. "On your feet, Lieutenant. We're not done yet." She took his hand, let him pull her up. The smoke was clearing slightly, and she could see bodies on the floor, some in tactical gear, some in FBI windbreakers. The cost was climbing. Then, cutting through the chaos, a new sound, sirens. Multiple vehicles close and getting closer. "That's federal response," Brennan said, blood streaming from a cut above her eye. "Someone finally figured out we were under attack." The remaining attackers must have heard it too, because suddenly they were retreating, pulling back through the smoke and the doorway, leaving their dead behind. Jackson's team pursued to the corridor, fired on the fleeing figures, but didn't chase far. "Let them go," Jackson ordered. "Secure the room. Get medical on the wounded." The next 30 minutes were organized chaos. Federal agents flooded the facility, FBI hostage rescue team, ATF tactical units, even local SWAT. Evelyn found herself sitting on the floor next to Carrick's bed, her hands shaking with delayed adrenaline, while paramedics worked on the wounded analyst a few feet away. Someone draped a blanket around her shoulders. Kim, looking exhausted but alive. "You did good," Kim said quietly. "Really good. I killed people. You saved people, including yourself. Don't lose sight of that." Brennan appeared now with her head wound bandaged, accompanied by a man in an expensive suit who carried himself with the authority of someone very important. "Ms. Cross," the man said, "I'm Assistant Director Marcus Vance, FBI. I've been briefed on the events of tonight. I want to personally thank you for your service." Evelyn looked at him blankly. "I'm a nurse." "You're considerably more than that." Vance gestured to one of his people, who handed him a tablet. "We've been analyzing the evidence you retrieved from Mercy Hill Regional. Combined with Mr. Carrick's testimony, we have enough to bring charges against 43 individuals, including 2 sitting senators, a deputy undersecretary of defense, and executives from 6 major defense contractors." "Derek Hartman?" Evelyn asked. "Currently in federal custody, singing like a canary. Turns out when faced with life in prison, people get very cooperative." Vance's expression was hard. "He's admitted to taking payments to ensure Carrick died at the hospital. He's also provided information about 3 other staff members who were compromised. They're being arrested as we speak." Evelyn thought about Hartman, about his smug face when he'd fired her, his absolute certainty that he was right and she was wrong. The idea of him in handcuffs was more satisfying than she'd expected. "What about the mole?" she asked. "The one inside the FBI." Vance's jaw tightened. We're still investigating, but we have strong leads. The leak about Carrick's location came from a specific terminal accessed with specific credentials. It's only a matter of time. And the attack tonight? We've identified 12 bodies so far, all matching personnel from a private military contractor called Sentinel Solutions. They're a subsidiary of Halston Defense Systems. Vance paused. The company that's at the center of the entire corruption case. So they sent their own people to kill their own witness, Evelyn said, and failed, thanks to you and the agents here. Vance looked around the room, at the bullet holes and bloodstains and broken equipment. This will all become evidence. Every body, every bullet casing, every piece of surveillance footage. Halston Defense just committed mass murder in a federal facility on camera. Even their lawyers can't spin that. Carrick spoke up from his bed, his voice weak but clear. When do I testify? As soon as you're medically cleared. We'll arrange transportation to a secure courthouse, maximum security, media blackout. Vance's expression softened slightly. Mr. Carrick, your courage tonight and over the past months is going to change everything. This is the largest corruption case in decades. People will study it in law schools for generations. I just want them in prison, Carrick said. All of them. For everyone they killed. They will be. Vance turned back to Evelyn. Miss Cross, we're going to need your statement. Everything that happened, from the moment you saved Carrick at the hospital until now. And I need to be honest with you. What you did in that morgue, killing Marcus Chen in self-defense, there will be an investigation. I understand. But given the circumstances, given that Chen was a known assassin with multiple warrants, and given that you were protecting federal evidence, I don't anticipate charges. If anything, you'll probably get a commendation. Vance hesitated. Though I imagine that's cold comfort right now. Evelyn looked at her hands, still trembling slightly. I became a nurse because I wanted to save lives. Tonight I took them. That's going to take some time to process. You took lives of people who were actively trying to murder a federal witness and destroy evidence of massive corruption, Vance said firmly. That's not murder, Ms. Cross. That's heroism. The word felt wrong. Heroes didn't spend the aftermath of firefights trying not to vomit. Heroes didn't see faces in the dark when they closed their eyes. Heroes didn't count bodies and wonder if each one was justified. But maybe that was exactly what heroes did. Maybe the people who never questioned, never doubted, never felt the weight of what they'd done. Maybe those people weren't heroes at all. Over the next several hours, Evelyn gave her statement to multiple federal agents, reviewed surveillance footage, identified bodies when possible. The facility was transformed into a crime scene, every corridor marked and photographed, every bullet hole documented. By the time the sun rose, Evelyn was sitting in a conference room with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, staring at nothing. Jackson found her there. He looked as exhausted as she felt, his tactical gear replaced by plain clothes, a bandage on his forearm from a wound she hadn't known he'd sustained. They're moving Carrick to the secure courthouse, he said. Testimony starts tomorrow. 3 days of him on the stand, laying out every detail of the corruption scheme. It's going to be a media circus. Good, Evelyn said. Let them see what he was willing to die for. Jackson sat down across from her. I talked to Brennan. She's putting together a full report on your actions tonight. It's going to make very interesting reading for some people in Washington. I don't want recognition. I just want to go home. Home's not safe yet. The people we killed tonight, they were just contractors. The people who hired them are still out there, and they're going to be very angry about how this played out. Jackson leaned forward. You need protection until the trials are over. Witness security, new identity if necessary. For how long? As long as it takes. Could be months. Could be years. He paused. Or you could make a different choice. Evelyn looked at him. What choice? The one where you stop hiding and start fighting. Jackson pulled out a folder, set it on the table between them. There's a position opening up. Joint Task Force, Medical Operations for Special Response Units. Exactly what you did tonight, being the person who can handle combat medicine, tactical decision-making, high-stress operations. The military needs people like you, Lieutenant. People who can think and fight and save lives when everything's going to hell. Evelyn opened the folder, scanned the contents. It was an official offer, complete with rank reinstatement, salary, benefits. Everything she'd walked away from 12 years ago, being handed back with a respectful request to reconsider. "I left that life because I didn't want to carry guns anymore," she said quietly. "And tonight you carried one anyway. Because when the stakes were high enough, you remembered who you really are." Jackson's voice was gentle but firm. "You can go back to being invisible if you want. Find another hospital, another night shift, another 20 years of routine. Or you can accept that you're not built for invisibility. You're built for exactly this, standing in the gap when no one else can or will." Evelyn thought about Derek Hartman sneering at her in the hospital, thought about the look on his face when the SEALs had walked past him to salute her instead, thought about 20 years of being underestimated, overlooked, treated like she was disposable. "If I accept this," she said, "what happens to my daughter? Maya. She's in Seattle. She's safe. She has no idea any of this happened. She stays safe. We can arrange protection if necessary, but honestly, once Carrick testifies and the arrests happen, the danger level drops significantly. The people at the top of this conspiracy will be too busy with their own legal problems to worry about revenge. And me? Where would I be based? Wherever we need you. Could be stateside training facilities, could be forward operating bases. You'd have a team, resources, authority to make decisions in the field." Jackson's expression was serious. "It won't be easy. You'll see combat again. You'll make hard choices again. But you'll also save lives that no one else could save. You'll train people who'll go on to save even more lives. Your impact will matter." Evelyn looked at the folder again. Lieutenant Evelyn Cross, reinstated with full honors. A second chance at a life she'd thought was over. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Take all the time you need. The offer stands until you decide." Jackson stood up, stretched. "For what it's worth, I've served with a lot of people over the years. Very few of them would have done what you did tonight. Walking into that morgue alone, fighting off Chen, retrieving the evidence, then holding the line here when everything went sideways. That takes a special kind of courage. Or a special kind of stupid. Sometimes those are the same thing." He smiled slightly. "Get some rest, Lieutenant. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." The next 72 hours passed in a blur. Carrick testified, laying out the corruption scheme in excruciating detail, backed by the evidence Evelyn had risked her life to retrieve. The media coverage was relentless. Every news outlet running stories about the brave whistleblower and the massive federal investigation. Some outlets even mentioned Evelyn, though her identity was protected. An unnamed nurse whose quick thinking saved the key witness was how most phrased it. Derek Hartman appeared on television being led into federal court in handcuffs, his expensive suit rumpled, his face pale with terror. Evelyn watched from a secure apartment where she'd been placed under protective custody and felt absolutely nothing. Not satisfaction, not anger, nothing. He'd made his choices and now he'd live with them. On the fourth day, Brennan visited. "All 43 indictments came down this morning," she said, sitting across from Evelyn in the small apartment's living room. 2 senators, the deputy undersecretary, 9 corporate executives, 32 supporting personnel. The DOJ is calling it the largest corruption prosecution in modern history. "Will they all go to prison?" Evelyn asked. "Most of them. Some will cut deals, provide testimony against the bigger fish. But the top tier? They're done. Finished. Their careers, their freedom, their legacies, all destroyed." Brennan leaned back. Carrick's testimony was devastating. The jury was literally in tears during some portions. When he talked about watching people die because they helped him, you could see the jurors making up their minds right there. "He's safe now?" "As safe as we can make him. New identity, relocation, federal protection for the foreseeable future. He'll never be James Carrick again, but he'll be alive." Brennan paused. "He asked me to give you this." She handed Evelyn a sealed envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter on hospital stationery. "Evelyn, I don't know if you'll ever read this or if you'll want to, but I needed to try. What you did for me, saving my life twice, risking everything to protect the evidence, fighting when you could have run, I can never repay that. You gave me a chance to make my testimony matter, to ensure that the people I watched die didn't die for nothing. That's a gift I don't deserve, but will spend the rest of my life trying to honor. You told me in that hospital room that the pilot who died in your arms, Danny Reeves, that his death wasn't your failure. Let me tell you something in return. Everyone who's died because of this corruption, everyone whose life was destroyed by the greed and criminality you helped expose. Their deaths aren't on you. They're on the people who pulled triggers and signed contracts and chose money over morality. You chose the opposite. You chose courage, and because of that choice, justice is possible. Thank you for being stronger than me. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for remembering who you were when it mattered most. James Evelyn read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. Not quite. He's a good man, she said. He's a broken man who you helped put back together enough to do the right thing, Brennan replied. That counts for something. What about the mole? The FBI leak. Brennan's expression darkened. We found him. Senior analyst named Robert Chen, no relation to Marcus, ironically. He'd been taking payments for 3 years, providing information about active investigations, witness locations, asset movements. He'll spend the rest of his life in federal prison. How many people died because of him? Too many, but he won't hurt anyone else now. Brennan stood up. I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. Are you okay? Really okay? Because what you went through, the trauma, the violence, the split-second life or death decisions, that's the kind of thing that breaks people. Evelyn thought about it. Was she okay? She'd killed 5 people in one night. She'd gone from nurse to soldier to killer and back again. She had nightmares when she managed to sleep. She still saw Marcus Chen's face when she closed her eyes, still felt the recoil of the rifle against her shoulder, still heard the sound of bodies hitting concrete. I don't know if I'm okay, she admitted, but I know I'm not broken. Damaged, maybe. Changed, definitely, but not broken. That's honest. I appreciate that. Brennan moved toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, if you decide to take Jackson's offer, the task force position, I think you'd be extraordinary at it. You have instincts that can't be taught, and skills most people don't develop in a lifetime. But if you decide you want to go back to being a nurse, to save lives without carrying a gun, I'll respect that too. Either way, you've earned the right to choose. After Brennan left, Evelyn sat alone in the apartment and thought about choices. She thought about the choice she'd made 20 years ago to leave the military after Danny Reeves died. She thought about the choice she'd made to save Carrick, despite Hartman's orders. She thought about the choice to send that message from his phone, to walk into that morgue, to pull the trigger in self-defense. Every choice had led her here, to this moment, to this crossroads. She picked up her phone and called Maya. Mom! Her daughter's voice was bright and uncomplicated by the darkness Evelyn had been living in. I've been trying to reach you for days. Your phone kept going to voicemail. I know, sweetheart, I'm sorry. Something came up at work. Are you okay? You sound different. Evelyn smiled despite everything. Maya had always been able to read her, even over the phone. I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I wanted to tell you something. What? I love you, and I'm proud of you, and no matter what happens next, I want you to know that every choice I've made, every risk I've taken, it's all been to make the world safer for people like you. There was a pause. Mom, you're kind of freaking me out. What's going on? Nothing bad, I promise. I'll explain everything soon, but right now I just needed to hear your voice. They talked for 30 minutes about Maya's work, her roommate, a guy she'd started dating. Normal things. Safe things. The life Evelyn had worked so hard to build, separate from violence and danger and impossible choices. When she hung up, Evelyn felt clearer than she had in days. She picked up the folder Jackson had given her and read through it again, this time carefully. The position was real, prestigious, dangerous. It would mean leaving the quiet life she'd built. It would mean accepting that she was a soldier, not just a nurse. It would mean carrying weapons and making life or death decisions and living with the consequences. But it would also mean saving lives that no one else could save, training people who would go on to save even more lives, making a difference that mattered. She thought about Derek Hartman's sneer. You're a nurse, not a hero. And she thought about Jackson's salute, the recognition that she'd been invisible by choice, not because she was unworthy of being seen. Evelyn Cross made her final decision. 3 weeks later, she stood in a government office building in Virginia, wearing a formal military uniform for the first time in 12 years. The ceremony was small, private, just a handful of people who needed to know. Assistant Director Vance was there, reading from official documents. Jackson and his team stood at attention. Brennan watched from the side, a slight smile on her face. Lieutenant Evelyn Cross, Vance said formally, by order of the Secretary of Defense and in recognition of your extraordinary service to this nation, you are hereby reinstated to active duty with full rank and honors. Furthermore, you are assigned to Joint Special Operations Medical Command, effective immediately. He pinned new insignia to her uniform, shook her hand firmly. Congratulations, Lieutenant. Welcome back. Jackson stepped forward, saluted properly this time, the way one soldier salutes another. Evelyn returned it. Glad to have you on the team, ma'am, he said. Glad to be here, she replied, and meant it. After the ceremony, Evelyn walked outside into bright sunlight. The Virginia sky was clear and blue, the air cool with the promise of autumn. She had new orders in her pocket, a new assignment waiting, a new chapter beginning. But before all that, she had one more thing to do. She drove to a small cemetery in Maryland, found the grave she'd visited only once before, 12 years ago. Danny Reeves, 2nd Lieutenant, U.S. Army, beloved son and friend. The headstone was simple, clean, well-maintained by family who still visited. Evelyn knelt beside it. I'm sorry I couldn't save you, she said quietly. I tried. I really tried. And for a long time I thought failing to save you meant I should stop trying to save anyone, that I should hide and be small and never take those risks again. A breeze rustled through the trees surrounding the cemetery. But I was wrong, Evelyn continued. You died because someone shot you, not because I failed. And if I'd given up, if I'd stayed small and invisible, a man named James Carrick would be dead right now. And 43 corrupt officials would still be destroying lives and stealing futures. So I'm not giving up anymore. I'm not hiding anymore. She stood up, brushed dirt from her uniform. I'm going back to the work you died doing. Saving people who need saving. Fighting when fighting matters. And I promise you, every life I save from here on out, I'll save in honor of the one I couldn't. The cemetery was quiet except for birdsong and distant traffic. Evelyn saluted the headstone, crisp and proper, then walked back to her car. She had a briefing in 6 hours, a team to meet, a mission to prepare for. Lieutenant Evelyn Cross was done being invisible. The following Monday, Derek Hartman appeared in federal court for his sentencing hearing. The courtroom was packed with media, victims' families, and federal prosecutors who'd built their case on the foundation Evelyn had helped secure. Hartman's lawyers had tried every trick, every delay, every legal maneuver. Nothing had worked. The judge was a woman in her 60s, appointed 30 years ago, with a reputation for fairness and an absolute intolerance for corruption. Mr. Hartman, she said, looking down at him from the bench, you were in a position of trust, hospital administrator, responsible for the health and safety of patients and staff. And you chose to betray that trust for money. You chose to facilitate murder. You chose to destroy lives. Hartman opened his mouth to speak, but his lawyer put a hand on his arm, silencing him. The evidence against you is overwhelming, the judge continued. Wire transfers, recorded phone calls, testimony from multiple witnesses. You took payments to ensure James Carrick died in your hospital. When a nurse under your supervision saved his life anyway, you fired her. And when federal investigators came asking questions, you lied, repeatedly. The courtroom was absolutely silent. I've read the victim impact statements, the judge said, from families of the people killed by the conspiracy you aided, from the nurse you fired, who nearly died protecting the evidence that made this prosecution possible, from patients who trusted your hospital and had that trust violated. The harm you've caused is incalculable. She paused, let the weight settle. Derek Hartman, you are hereby sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole. You will serve this sentence in a maximum security facility, and when you are released, if you live that long, you will be a registered felon for the rest of your life. You will never work in healthcare again. You will never hold a position of authority again. You will spend the remainder of your days living with the consequences of choosing money over morality. The gavel came down with a sound like thunder. Hartman was led away in handcuffs, his face white with shock, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume from a life that no longer existed. Evelyn watched from the back of the courtroom, wearing civilian clothes, anonymous in the crowd. She felt the satisfaction she'd expected to feel in that underground parking lot weeks ago. Not joy exactly, but justice. The knowledge that some scales had been balanced, some wrongs addressed. Brennan appeared beside her. "Feels good, doesn't it?" "It feels like closure," Evelyn said. "Or the beginning of it, anyway. The other sentences are coming down this week. Senators, executives, all of them. Thanks to you." "Thanks to Carrick. I just helped him get the evidence heard." "You did considerably more than that." Brennan handed her a newspaper. Page 6. Evelyn opened it, found an article headlined, "Hero Nurse Returns to Military Service." It was brief, carefully worded to protect operational details, but it told the story. Anonymous nurse saves federal witness, helps expose massive corruption, receives military commendation, and returns to active duty. "They wanted a name," Brennan said. "I made sure they didn't get one. But the story needed to be told. People deserve to know that courage still exists." Evelyn folded the newspaper and handed it back. "I don't need people to know. I just need the work to matter." "It does, more than you realize." Brennan smiled. "Good luck, Lieutenant. Something tells me you're going to do extraordinary things." 6 months later, Evelyn was in a different country on a different operation, doing work she couldn't talk about for people who would never know her name. The mission had gone sideways, extraction delayed, hostile forces closing in, a team of operators pinned down and bleeding out. She moved through hostile territory with medical equipment and a rifle, the same combination that had defined her 12 years ago. Found the wounded operators, stabilized them under fire, coordinated their evacuation while returning fire at targets she couldn't always see. When it was over, when everyone was alive and on the helicopter heading back to base, the team leader looked at her with something like awe. "Where the hell did you come from?" he asked over the roar of the rotors. Evelyn smiled, exhausted and alive and exactly where she was supposed to be. "Just a nurse," she said, but she knew better, and so did everyone who'd ever underestimated her, ever dismissed her, ever thought she was too small or too quiet or too invisible to matter. Lieutenant Evelyn Cross was done being underestimated. She was done being invisible, and she was just getting started.